Hey, happy Easter! Please bear with me for 2 minutes before we start with the podcast. As you know, all episodes, which included an interview with John Captain Crunch Draper, so far we mentioned his GoFundMe, and also this time I would rather suggest to help John out if you have a buck spare or two, and go to his GoFundMe for his healing fund. As you know, not everybody has social health insurance and can afford all the bills when it comes to medical care. So for John Draper, that's GoFundMe.com, and then in the search mask, look up John Draper. Again, GoFundMe.com and search for John Draper. There you find it. Thanks a lot. Also, for the intro promo this time, I thought, who would be better than Joey Bear from South Africa, our fellow streamer, who had a whole section talking about her fund she set up to help a community friend of hers when he got sick and is actually still recovering. So I totally feel the same way she felt for her fellow community member. That's how I feel for John. So I also personally would like to thank you in advance for listening to this podcast, because it's going to be long. Thanks a lot. Well, now let's go to the intro promo.
Hi, I'm Joey Bear, and you are listening to the Scene World podcast.
Alrighty, so welcome to the Scene World podcast.
Hello.
This time with Frank here. Nice to see you again.
Good to be back. It's been
Nice.
quite a while.
And well, a nice hat on your head.
My
So
Fallout hat.
yeah, I was like, I remember this guy. Yeah. He doesn't look too good on this one, actually.
No, he's not doing well. I think this is the rad symbol or symbol. I'm not too. I don't remember. It's been quite a while since I played Fallout 4.
Ah, interesting. Alrighty, so in a minute, before we jump to the interview part, which is actually this time with Jon Artigo, the screenwriter of the upcoming movie Employee 13, and that's, well, I would say an action flick movie about the life of John Captain Crunch Draper, the phone freaker, who got his name from the Captain Crunch whistle from the cereals. And we had him on the show a couple of times, once for the historical interview and once for the podcast itself. And and now they are making a movie out of him. And for this, as I said, I spoke to Jon Artigo, the screenwriter, and also to Craig Wilson Fraser, who was also the guy who did help John writing his book a few years back. And also we have a little talk with John Draper himself, and that will be quite interesting. But before I jump to there, we have some news, and that is why Frank is with me, so we can discuss about what's happening in gaming, tech, and all those things. Would you like to start?
Sure,
Yeah.
why not? I'm going to start with something that kind of piqued my interest, and I'm sure a lot of people coming up, with Tears of the Kingdom approaching its release. There were rumors quite a few months back about that Nintendo Switch OLED that was themed with Tears of the Kingdom, and that rumor turned out to be true. A couple days ago, Nintendo released a statement proving that it's existing, and they're actually combating a lot of the people who are trying to scalp it It is available, I think, as of right now, as of recording. I don't know how long that's going to last, but special edition Nintendo consoles, especially Zelda, don't typically last that long. But it does look really cool. Do you have a Switch at home?
Yes, of course I have a Switch, but an original one, not an OLED one. But the
Same.
interesting question would be, does it have a speaker? Because Link is mute. Oh, that's a really low ball joke, I know. It's a lame joke. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, would you consider upgrading though? Because it's an
No.
OLED.
No, I'm not interested at all.
Yeah. I don't blame you there. I'm like you said, I'm rocking my launch Switch. I got it the day it came out. It's been a trooper. I don't really look at the console much anyways. It usually just sits in my entertainment center. I just play it docked on the TV. So I don't really have a need for a special edition. It does look really cool though. And if something were to have happened to my Switch and I needed one, I would get it because why not? But at this point in the game, I'm just kind of holding out for a new system entirely.
I'm also the one who argues if the new Switches that don't have the function to switch would actually be still, well,
I agree with you. That would be
if they should hold the name Switch, because you can't hook them up to the TV. Like, why would you call a Switch if you can't switch the mode? Anyway,
then their marketing would get a little iffy. Like with the 3DS when they removed the 3D and they called it the 2DS, and people who weren't like in the know were very confused and thought, is it an older system? Does it play 3DS games?
Yeah.
So that would be confusing, but I mean, they were able to do it with Sony was able to do it with the Vita, with the PlayStation TV, and it was just a much smaller box, and it played it on the television. I think that would be the only way Nintendo could get me to buy another version of like the current Switch.
But that's not the first time.
Version.
But that's not the first time Nintendo removed functionality. I remember the latest versions of the Nintendo Wii can't play GameCube games anymore.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. They got rid of that component in there. But actually, so funny story on that. The only reason they got rid of it was just to cut costs so that they didn't have to put the memory card slot or the GameCube ports, the controller ports. The console itself was just locked out of playing GameCube games by software. And they ultimately, it was pretty much because the Wii like components inside of it, it's based on the GameCube.
I didn't know that. Interesting. Okay.
So even those like the Wii Mini, I remember, was I think the latest revision of the Wii, and it was the one where they cut the SD card out as well, and there was no internet capabilities. But even that one could technically play GameCube games through, soft modding. But they just locked it out on a software front to cut costs because of the GameCube ports and the memory card slots.
I remember there was also an argument about the European model of the PlayStation 4, because I've read an article saying that the American PlayStation 4 and the Japanese one actually have an FPGA-based, hardware-based emulation, so you can have backward compatibility to the PlayStation 3, but the European models use software emulation for the backward.
For which system?
For the PlayStation 4, I believe it was.
Yeah. Oh, I think. Do you mean like the PlayStation 3 era?
Oh, like was it the 3? Okay, then I mistaken that.
I mean, you could be thinking of something else, but I do know like back PS3 era, it was the first launch consoles, the first PlayStation 3 FATs. Those all were backwards compatible with PS2 and PS1.
It was
through hardware emulation.
Yes, exactly.
It had
in the American and Japanese version, and the European version, right from the start when it came onto the market, even for the first versions, they used software for that.
We ended up getting that version too. Yeah, it was a very limited release of those original ones with hardware, and then they eventually scrapped it. And like the PS3 FAT I ended up getting does not have any backwards compatibility, but it did have Linux back then.
Not at all. They
completely got rid of it on the latest version of the FAT, and then the Slim, and then the Super Slim going forward. The only backwards compatibility was PS1. You could still play PS1 games on all of them, but couldn't play any PS2 games unless you downloaded like the PSN digital versions. But
Interesting. Good that you correct me here, so I remember it wrong. Interesting.
Oh no, you're good.
Well, I thought it was the PS4. You corrected me, it was the PS3. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I have all three models of the PS3.
Yeah.
Well, all three. Like I have a fat, a slim, a super slim. I don't have a backwards compatible one, but they're getting really pricey.
That's what I wanted to say. They became pretty pricey when people found out the differences about the model. I remember that I was looking at eBay. I was like, oh my god, people are really doing that. I think it was just
like a convenience thing, like having your PS3 and your PS2 and your PS1, I guess, all in one device. And it all connected through HDMI, so it made that transitional period from component cables to HDMI a lot easier. But I mean, nowadays it's like I personally would rather just have a dedicated system for each system.
True.
Well, PS5 and PS4 was the exception, since this generation was a little bit blurred.
Well, the thing is, component wasn't really a big thing here in Germany. So when the PS2 had component, most people didn't use it, despite it had the better picture. But of course, I'm a nerd. I got a component cable and I got an adapter for switching, because I have a DVD recorder that also has component. So I
had my Wii hooked up through component back in the day, but by the time I ended up getting a PS3 for the first time, I already had an HD TV, so it was HDMI. There was no question there.
Exactly, that's what some people don't know, that component actually is kind of an early version of HDMI. Of course.
Well, yeah, because it's capable of, I think, up to 1080i interlaced.
Exactly, but the difference is it doesn't have content protection. HDCP, right?
That's true. And the PS3 was, I believe, one of the first systems to introduce that.
Exactly. Yeah. So to actually, the interesting thing is I didn't find an original component cable, so I actually used an AV cable and recolored the connectors, so I would not mess up my mind by connecting the wrong wires. But of course,
I think I still have a couple of the official cables. I even have the component cable for the PSP. I don't know if you remember the PSP Slim. They added that functionality in for the PSP 2000 series, and you could plug it into a TV through either component or composite. I think composite you could only play movies and like music, but the component cable would actually let you play your games, and that was kind of cool. It's kind of like a predecessor to the Switch.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how it was actually, because my PS2 I got secondhand, and I don't know if the component cable was actually packed with the system.
No, it came with the composite. It came with standard RCA.
You see? Yeah. Well, okay.
At least it did here. I don't know if it was any different out in Germany, but.
Well, I mean, the same with the NES, Super NES. It came with an RF cable rather than
that it did here too as well.
Yeah, and
I think the Super Nintendo was the first one to start including a composite.
Yeah, I don't remember how it was. Too long ago, and I didn't care as a kid. As long as I got picture and sound, I was fine. And
I wasn't picky as a kid either.
Exactly. Yeah. So super interesting. But hey, it's interesting that you mentioned Tears of the Kingdom and didn't really call it Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So
I figured everybody would know what it was at this point. But
so
yes, it's the newest Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
The sequel to Breath of the Wild.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I can also throw something in about a game, and that would be Simon's Sorcerer Origins. Which is a game series mostly known in UK and Germany. So I guess it never came across your desk at some point. But
I've never heard of it, no.
Yeah, see? Yeah, that's it. It was originally an Amiga game, 93, but there was a talkie version for the PC. And it's actually a classic Adventuresoft game from UK.
So like a point and click, right?
Point and click, exactly. And it actually went, the license went to Germany. So the last two titles were actually produced in Germany.
and now it moved to Italy, to Rome actually, to indie development studio. And we at Scene World a while ago, we had the first interview about the game in English, because before all the interviews the developers did were in Italian. And of course, you know me, I'm like, no, we don't do translations. It has to be in English. So, and just recently I found out through the Steam forums that the founder and CEO, the founder and the CEO of the studio just mentioned in the forums in a comment reply that the game is delayed to a year. So sadly, it didn't come out on the 28th of March, but it's coming out sometime next year. Yeah. So that's sad. So that means also that our interview will probably stay exclusive for a while, because I'm not sure if they will do other English interviews with a year delay in front of them. You will see.
This is the newest version of the game series, of the Simon series, right? So
Well,
it's Simon the Sorcerer Origins?
Yeah, normally you would think it's a reboot, but it's actually taking place story-wise before he was 13 as a teenager.
Okay, so it's a prequel.
It's a prequel, yeah, but they call it Origin, despite by that title you would assume it's a reboot, because that's normally what it is. But it is a prequel.
It could be kind of considered like a soft reboot, because since in the United States we weren't too familiar with it, so maybe kind of to try to introduce it to other territories.
Yeah, and it got a bit of a backlash because the publisher Leonardo Games, they also admitted that in the interview, pushed them to make a trailer early, an announcement trailer that had unfinished animation scenes and so on. And now they actually said that they again revamped the graphics and the graphic style. That is why the game is delayed for until next year. And since we are still at the beginning of this year, it could be a year or longer, whatever 2024 could mean. Yeah, but at least
it's pretty vague
another
right
7
now.
months. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it does. Hopefully it doesn't end up, becoming vaporware. Hopefully it does release eventually.
I'm pretty sure it's not vaporware, especially since Simon Woodruff, the original designer and inventor of the game series, he has a controlling eye and contribution to the game. Good. Yeah, so it will definitely happen. It's not.
That's good. I hope. I mean, realistically, like how you mentioned, the trailer came out earlier than it should have. That's a very common trend that happens these days. Developers are kind of pushed by the publisher to release a trailer to show off the game earlier than it's intended. And there's a multitude of reasons why, but it ultimately, that's disappointing that they had to get attacked and got backlash.
Yeah,
or,
well, that was the
animation's not being done when it wasn't really their fault. But I mean, that's, like I said, pretty typical this day and age. And at least now that with the delay being official, they've got time to work on it. They haven't given any official date, so it could theoretically take until December 2024. Yeah, and give them as much time as they need, especially with this being kind of a soft reboot of the series. I feel like take as much time as you need, get it as polished as possible,
and get a new audience.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I'll keep an eye on it. I mean, I personally haven't played many point and click games since I was a kid. I used to play the Humongous Entertainment games. Not sure if you're familiar with those at all.
Never heard of that.
They're for children. It's like Freddy Fish, Pajama Sam, Putt Putt, Spy Fox. I played those as a kid, but then I kind of dipped out of the genre. But I mean, I was looking at the Steam page earlier, and it does look interesting. I would definitely be willing to give it a shot.
Oh, you actually checked out. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Monkey Island? But at least you know Monkey Island, right?
I do know of Monkey Island, but again, I haven't played them since I kind of dipped out.
Such a knowledge gap.
Game Pass looks really good, though. But at the same time, I'm the kind of person, like, I would definitely have to start from the first game. I can't jump into the fourth.
Yeah.
I think it's the fourth, right? The fourth official, because I know there were after ownership got transferred, there was some different entries.
Yes. Well, I mean, there are a lot of series having a reboot, refreshing. I mean, there's a new RoboCop game coming out this year. There is a new Test Drive coming out this year. So there are a lot of sequels to old game series. It's amazing.
I mean, honestly, what's old is new, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you must be 28 by now, right? You don't have this connection like me. When I was a teenager, I played those original games when they were coming out in the 90s. So I'm like, oh my god, I never thought I would see another sequel or prequel or reboot of this game series again. And now it's happening. It's all coming back, and publishers are fighting for the license.
I think 2023 is kind of like the year of dreams, right? Like, think about it. We got GoldenEye in January. GoldenEye came to Xbox and Switch. Like, it's the game that everybody thought was in licensing hell and was never going to release ever again.
Exactly.
We got it, mostly unmodified.
But the hardcore YouTube reviewers, they didn't leave a good eye on the Switch version, from what I saw.
To be fair, I didn't play the Switch version. I played it on Game Pass. I mean, the Switch version is, so from what I understand, the Switch version is just the N64 version emulated with online multiplayer capabilities. And the Xbox version is actually like a reverse engineered remake of it. Built from the ground up. It's the same game, but it's not using the same code. And I believe that had something to do with like the licensing agreement with Nintendo's ownership in it, because it's split between, I believe, Rare, Nintendo, and then the owners of James Bond. So it's very mucky, but the fact that we got it, I'm happy. And it's not a perfect port by any means. I know the one that was going to release on Xbox 360, that one was definitely going to be more polished and a more true remake, if you will. But I'm just glad it exists in a more modern form with modern control scheme. That's all I needed. And I ended up finally playing through it. That was a game I've never beaten before because of the odd control scheme on N64. Just, I didn't really play first-person shooters back then. I didn't get into them until the Xbox and PS2 era. So,
okay.
So at that point, that control scheme was just primitive and it was hard for me to grasp. But playing it with an Xbox One controller in a more traditional sense, it was great.
And the James Bond GoldenEye is actually one of those games that especially became famous because of its huge speedrunners community.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't for them, perhaps nobody would talk about it anymore.
I mean, to be fair, I don't really pay attention to speedrunners. I don't speedrun games really myself. I tend to take my time and just enjoy the experience. But my personal reason for wanting to play James Bond is kind of its historical relevance. It was one of the first console first-person shooters to really hit the mainstream, because prior to that, first-person shooters were just considered Doom clones. They were on PC. They were, not something that you brought home to your television. They were something that you had to have a gaming computer or an office computer. You had to have, it was just more complicated. It wasn't as mainstream back then. And GoldenEye was kind of the first to introduce that couch co-op aspect of first-person shooting.
Good point. Yeah.
But actually, speaking of Doom, we have some news about Doom.
Exactly. Yes. Well, there is a RAM expansion unit that has been developed. They're called Red, and somebody actually managed to get the super CPU version of Doom for the C64 running on this expansion unit, which is quite interesting.
And from the video on YouTube, it looks like it runs really well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the super CPU is known for making this 0.98 megahertz Z64 running at 20 megahertz, you know.
So it's
And
like it's overcharged, definitely.
it's overcharged,
not running stock.
yes. But then, of course, in the comments in the comments of the YouTube video, people were asking like, so will it be fully be compatible to the super CPU? But people say, nah, the creators are not really interested because they think there's not much use case. Well, that depends. I'm using my super CPU. I'm having one of those beasts for playing Test Drive. Because Test Drive is one of those few games on the C64 that has a frame rate limiter in it, which is super amazing. That means Accolade, the programmers, in 1987 thought so much ahead that they thought there might be a speed up hardware in the future that would make the game unplayable, so we put in a frame rate limiter, and they even made it that far that the fast loader, the IQ loader used, still works despite normally those IQ speed loaders don't work because the whole computer is sped up and stuff. So Accolade with Test Drive, the original Test Drive from 87, was very forward thinking. So you don't need a patched version like all these other games to make it playable, because if you play like
the ROM.
Yeah, exactly.
Entirely.
Because if you play like Mercenary or Stunt Car Racer, it's like a few seconds and you are on the ground because the game is running 20 times faster and you can't control it anymore. So that's for me super interesting. Yeah. So it's good to see that somebody puts passion into making RAM expansion units that's obviously also able to speed up the machine. It's actually something that's happening a lot. This year, a lot of people are paying attention to RAM expansion for the Z64. I don't know why that is, but that's really something that's going on this year. Yeah.
Well, I've noticed too, it's just there seems to be like a common trend of just reverse engineering games and releasing them onto older hardware. Like I've been following for a while now. I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. It's Laszlo something. He goes by WLS, and he's on itch.io. He actually ports a bunch of old C16 and old PC games to the Game Boy. Wow. And he's been doing it for quite a while now. And a lot of his ports are really impressive. Like, I think he ported Heebie-Jeebies, Monkey Magic, Purple Turtles. Those were just a couple of the ones.
Oh my God. Purple
and the ports are really good. They're very faithful to their PC versions. And I just really love it when people are able, these homebrew developers are able to, port these games over to hardware they were never intended to be on.
Purple Turtle.
I'll send you a link after this podcast. I'll send you a link to his page.
You should definitely. Purple Turtles especially, I always played with my grandfather as a little child. And I always remember this music. Well,
then maybe you can tell me how faithful it is, because to be fair, I don't have as much exposure to a lot of these games, so they're kind of my first time playing a lot of them. But in my opinion, they run really well. They run as if they were, just a faithful Game Boy game.
But here's the problem. Games in 83, 84, Paul fixed them. So I always played the game 25% slower than it was intended to. That means the music is pretty slow and
maybe he sped it up then, because I didn't notice the games like playing slow. To a degree, Game Boy games themselves run a little bit slow, but it felt on par with things that were officially released onto it.
Yeah, I mean, you are American. For you, Purple Turtle plays normal. Yeah. You actually can see that if you look at Power Drift remixes on YouTube. If they were done by an American, they are playing 25% too fast because the game played 25% too fast.
I mean,
And-
for all I know, they may be not running at the proper speed because
Yeah.
I'm running them on what I'm doing is because he just offers the ROMs available on itch.io as free downloads. And I just download it, put it onto a flash cart, and I play it on actual hardware. So I'm just sitting there playing it. I dug out my old Game Boy Color, and I've been playing them on that just for some nostalgia.
It's just me. I'm always pissed if something is not the way it should be. Just because you nerded out about your hardware knowledge about the PlayStation, there's an interesting thing. Why? I mean, Activision always was an American company, right? So they always released American NTSC games for all their consoles and computer releases. And now the question is, why has an American remixer on YouTube his remix 25% too fast because the game runs too fast? And that's the thing. It's, to my knowledge, the only game Activision ever did, published, and obviously created, because Power Drift originally was an arcade machine, by Activision UK. And that is why the original
Then that's probably
game
why that
is a
little
PAL
little
game.
future proofing didn't end up making it into anything else. Because did they end up making more games? Their UK division?
The UK division was normally a publisher, not a developer, which
So
makes
there you
it
go.
which makes it super interesting. Normally, Activision UK would just, PAL fix games so they wouldn't crash on our side, and then publish them in UK, obviously, and then Germany and Italy, all those countries. But Power Drift was, if I'm not mistaken, the only C64 game they ever did in UK and not in America. So I mean, if you go back in those histories down the lane, it's so awful because nowadays you have this knowledge, and back then you didn't know, and you bought something that was subpar and not really up to standard, and you didn't know that the music is too slow.
You had no idea because it's the only thing you had exposure to.
Yeah. And here's the thing, for example, there were some dumb problems. For example, Jeroen Tel is mostly known for his Robocop 3 arrangement on the NES and C64. Everybody loves the intro music, the intro theme of Robocop 3. It has this super solo, and on the NES the bass line is super intense.
But I bet that frame rate dip ruins it.
Yeah, here's the thing. The game was, Jeroen Tel is a Dutch composer. So the game was coded in America. So when they did the original release for the NES in America, they included a code to speed up the music a bit, so it would run at 60 hertz, and not at 50 because it would be too slow. But when they did the fix for the European market, they forgot to remove the code that speeds up the music
so yours
on
was
the
running
American. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, so even slower, than it should be, despite the music piece itself was composed on 50 hertz, because Jeroen Tel has obviously European equipment, and if he coded something for Activision or any other development studio or publisher in America, he would deliver it in 50 hertz, and the coding team would have to deal with it. And for the
I have a question that you might actually know. When did Europe make the switch from 50 to 60 hertz? When did it finally become?
We never did this. We never did the switch. We still have 50 hertz.
You're still at 50 hertz, really?
Yes,
so
always.
So
yeah,
even newer games.
Yes. So that's the reason. That's the reason why when the C64 Mini was released, and because Retro Games is a British company, many retro YouTubers couldn't get the C64 Mini to run on their LCD TVs or monitors because American devices, in contrast to European devices, often don't have a PAL mode compatibility.
Okay.
That means no picture, black. You know, and you have people like 8-bit guy like saying at the beginning of the video, I thought my C64 Mini was broken when it arrived. But instead it was like, oh, I totally forgot. Most of our equipment here in America doesn't work with the European 50 Hz signals. So you get no picture at all. While here in Europe, every TV, even the older models have NTSC. So I can, without worrying, I can connect American consoles, whatever.
It's become more unified now.
Yeah. I mean, so we still have 50 Hz, yes. No change.
That's good.
Yeah. So
good to know.
So we still have the black borders if something is improperly fixed because we have a different line number for our picture.
See, and here I am just thinking, like, even 60 hertz, which would equate to what, like around 60 frames a second. Like, I've gotten used to playing like more modern releases at higher frame rates than that. Like, I believe my monitor supports up to 144. So like I typically will play like newer releases at around 120 if it's not on, console, because I believe both modern consoles are still locked to 60.
Yeah, but HDMI and so on still, even this very modern standard still relies on the difference between 50 and 60 Hz. That means your C64 Mini bought in Europe doesn't put a picture on most American LCD TVs.
Well, I guess to be fair, I don't think I own any PAL systems, so
yeah. That's the difference between you and me. 99% of all consoles I own, I got modified to switch between Japanese, American, and European.
I have a couple modded systems myself. Like I have, which I don't have that many games for it, granted, but I have a TurboGrafx 16, and I have a little region switcher on there. So if I were to import like a Japanese game, I could easily play it. I know the N64 and like the Super Nintendo, they're very easy to mod. You can either just like take the top shell off, or you can like shave a little piece inside of them so that the cartridges just fit on there properly.
But
I haven't done it myself. My Super Nintendo is actually, I got it for like $5 because it's in pieces. It's in terrible shape and it was advertised as not working.
Wow.
But I just cleaned it really well with isopropyl alcohol and was able to get it to work. All the screw holes are damaged. It's completely destroyed, but it works. But the benefit of it being destroyed is I can just take the top shell off, and I have a few Super Famicom games. I have a copy of Yoshi's Island for the Super Comboy, which is a whole convoluted history in itself. But I can play all those games on this US Super Nintendo just because of the fact that those little plastic clips are gone.
But it only works for those who are not region locked. There are some region locked Super Nintendo games.
Yeah, I believe you're right. On a case by case, it's the actual chipset itself and the cartridge locks it out.
Exactly.
Whereas like on the NES, they just had the
region lock chip.
Lockout chip.
Lockout chip, exactly. You could just cut one wire and it would stop working.
I used to repair NESs back when I was young.
So you know that.
And that was one of my go-tos because most of the NESs I would buy didn't work, right? They would have that flashing screen. And the easiest solution for that was it was called the Eliminator. And it was a pink cartridge that went into the NES slot. And you would just, clean the cartridge slot with alcohol.
Oh, interesting.
And then I would take it apart and just disable that lockout chip. You could take a screwdriver, just take a flathead, and if you found the right, chip, you just popped it off. As long as the chip was deactivated, that would disable the lockout chip. You could play those unlicensed games. And the reason I did it was so that your compatibility with actual games worked a little bit better, because over time that lockout chip would corrode.
I didn't know that. Interesting. Okay.
And that's the main reason. Everybody always jumps to the conclusion it's the cartridge slot, and most of the time that is the case. But that lockout chip will actually cause your system to read your legitimate cartridges as unlicensed, and that's why they won't work. So disabling that lockout chip is actually just like a little refurbishing workaround, which I guess purists would probably hate the fact that you're technically destroying something on the system. But
that is why
nowadays,
nowadays,
for longevity, I think it's worth doing if you plan on using the NES.
Exactly. That's why nowadays you only cut off one pin, so you can still undo your change and not, as we mentioned, destroying the original state of the console too much.
I would literally just take that whole just gone.
Yeah. I even got mine modified with stereo mod, so I even have 2 adjustment knobs on the front for left and right channel, and people are like, "Oh my god, you destroyed the NES!"
Actually, that just reminded me too. My TurboGrafx 16 is also RCA modded, so I can use composite cables, because I know that only supported RF.
Yeah.
So that's another mod.
Like the NES top loader, where they actually removed the better picture.
Hold it down. It's the reason I refuse to buy a top loader. Like I do have a Famicom. I have a launch Famicom in my collection, one with the square buttons that are made of rubber, and that also only supported radio frequency.
Wow.
But I mean that I kind of just have to have. I don't really. I do take it out every once in a while just to make sure it still works, but I'm not really actively playing on it because those rubber pads I can't replace. So once those wear out, they're gone.
But we also have to take into account the NES was a devil when it comes to region lock, because it was one of the few consoles where you actually had different PAL regions. PAL A, PAL B, so you couldn't buy a game from UK and play it in Germany. I'm like, what? It's PAL. No, it says on the cover.
Actually, that
PAL
just
A,
brought
PAL
up
B.
another thing. Yeah. I'm pretty sure disabling the lockout chip also disables region locking, because I have a copy of Russian Attack for the NES, and it's a PAL region game, now that I think about it. Yeah. And I didn't really realize that until a while later. I was just like going through my cartridges, and I noticed the little symbol on the bottom. And I'm not sure which PAL region it is, but... So that's another thing, too, if for compatibility with the NES, disable that lockout chip.
Right. But, of course, some games like Rocket Ranger will crash because the timing is so off that the game can't run.
Yeah, so I guess use case-by-case basis.
Exactly. If the coder and now I forgot the name. Cinemaware was known to push the hardware limits of the machines because they made photorealistic graphics. Those games, they most likely crash. Because I once bought something from a German mail trader, and they gifted me an American release of Rocket Ranger for the NES, and I would plug it into my region lock chip removed NES, and it would simply crash.
Well, I guess that's the case where, thankfully, we have emulators.
Well, I also got a Generation Next, which is a clone console from 2005 from Messiah.
Huh. Haven't heard of that one, and I am pretty familiar with Famiclones.
And it's pretty rare. It is from America, and it is so famous because it has a Famicom slot on the top and an NES slot on the front.
I think I actually have heard of that one before, or at least I've seen similar ones that had the 2 cartridge slots.
Yeah. And I found one for $70 like 12 years ago, with some of the original box, and I was like, I have to get this because this is super rare, and I never saw it on eBay ever since. So
it's kind of like I have the Famiclone I have. It's not as sophisticated as that one, but I bought this back when I was very young. It was actually before I even had an actual NES. I bought a Famiclone off eBay because it was, the cheapest way for a kid to get an NES. And the one I ended up getting was called the Family Boy 8, and it came with
Never
like
heard of
8
them.
built-in games. They were
Okay.
all ROM hacks of
Wow.
different games. So like I think the first one was called like Mushroom Men or Mushroom Man or something, and
Oh.
it was obviously a clone of Mario, just replacing Mario with a mushroom, and the sprites
Funny.
changed and the music just a one repeating track over and over again. But it came with an adapter so I could use, because it was a Famiclone, so it played Famicom games out of the box, but it came with a little adapter so I could use NES games, and that was actually my first exposure to the NES.
Interesting.
I didn't end up getting an actual NES until many years after that.
Interesting.
And I still have it to this day. It still works. It's not the ideal way to play any of the games, but...
What I found interesting, by the way, when you compiled your news, you actually mentioned Tencent in your news list, which I find interesting because many people are not aware of the Chinese brand Tencent, despite they have so much control in the gaming industry nowadays.
They're one of the biggest in the industry, and it's kind of a little known fact people don't know.
Interesting, yeah, exactly. And you actually, well, I mean, you can mention it. You send it to me. Tell me, what is the news about Tencent and Sega?
Well, they officially confirmed they will not be coming to E3. So that's on top of, the big three, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, announcing they aren't going to be at the show. Sega's not going to be there. Tencent's not going to be there. And I mean, what a lot of people don't realize, Tencent not being there means that a lot of these other companies they're going to follow suit. They're going to follow,
No Epic, nothing.
Epic's going to be out. So things are not looking very good for E3 right now.
That's exactly what happened to Gamescom last year, by the way. And now, a year later, the big publishers that dropped out last year are announcing they are coming back this year. So
that's a good thing, at least. So hopefully Gamescom is actually, picks up the way it should this year.
And hopefully E3 will follow suit next year, because I've read rumors that people say E3 might be dying.
Well, and there's rumors right now that they're going to cancel this year's E3, which, I mean, I really hope not. I understand that it's disappointing. I mean, like me personally, I've been paying attention to E3 since I was a kid. I remember watching on TV. There was a television station in the United States, G4, and there was always E3 coverage that whole week of E3. And but it's just different now. Back then I was paying attention to the big three, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and the third parties, of course. But those were the big draws. Those press conferences, like Nintendo's, was always great. And then Nintendo was the first one to dip out, doing their Nintendo Directs, which now it seems like that's kind of the route everybody's going. And it's a shame, but I don't think that E3 needs to die. I think just some kind of restructuring needs to be done, which I know they were already trying to do.
Wasn't that also the show where Sony had their famous press conference? 199
Racer.
No.
Or are you thinking of a different one?
The one where he came up the stage and said 199.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. I think
there's been a lot of big moments at E3. E3 is a very historical,
Yeah, I remember.
Piece of gaming history.
That was 94. The press conference at E3 94. The race between Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation. And and Sega started with like, we have this super amazing console and blah 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 and all those
I remember
graphic features and so on. And then the Sony marketing guy came to stage. He said 199 and left. And I some years back I found a recording of that original press conference. I will.
There's footage of it all over YouTube now, thankfully. Yeah. Like another moment I think of is Reggie Fils-Aimé when he first took on the role as president of Nintendo back then, and he was like, "We're about kicking ass, taking names, and making games." And I remember that was just like a big moment because prior to that, Nintendo was always seen as being this kid-friendly company, which they still are. But Reggie kind of just offered up a little bit more edginess, and
Mm.
it was just like a moment. I feel like it was like the beginning of that Reggie era. There were
Which-
tons of examples like that though at E3.
Which is interesting that you mention it, because we also have an interview coming up with the guys from Postal 4, and they actually told us in the interview that Nintendo was one of those companies being super happy that when they heard that Postal 4 is being ported to the Switch.
Yeah,
So-
it's totally a different era now. I mean, if you look at like the eShop, for example, there's
Yeah.
some very questionable games on there that
Yeah,
it's like the kind of things you would expect on Steam, you
Yeah.
know, or like the Apple Apple App Store or something, but it's totally different era, and I'm all for it though. There's no reason why the Switch should be locked down to games rated E for everyone, or even T for teen. Like the mature gamers still play the
Exactly.
Switch.
exactly.
I mean, I personally use my Nintendo for Nintendo games, and I do
You see?
play most of my third-party games elsewhere. But I'm also in a privileged situation where I own, you know, an Xbox, a PlayStation, and
A
a Switch.
PS5.
There's a lot of people who aren't fortunate enough, and if the Switch is your
True.
only system, you should still be able to play games like BioShock or Call
True.
of Duty, which is coming to the Switch. That was an announcement from I think a couple weeks ago now.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember back then the discussion with Doom. Like, yeah, well, nah, probably
Yeah, that
not,
came out
not-
on the launch year of Switch, I believe.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. It was a discussion between the system is too weak and Nintendo wouldn't like it because it's so violent. And then
If I remember correctly, though,
Yeah.
that port was really well received, though. It
Yeah, by
ran
Panic Button.
well.
by Panic Button. Panic
Mhm.
Button was like, we can do it, and they did it. And it's interesting how they managed to scale down the details and the resolution, even
But keeping
the
a
portable
consistent
mode.
frame rate, too, which
Exactly.
is a very important
Yeah.
thing with games like Doom.
And making it so that it doesn't look like cheesecake in those moments when it's
When it's more
reduced the-
intensive.
Exactly, when it's it's reducing the frame rate in a way and the resolution that the people don't throw up because it looks so ugly. So it's a super interesting mix. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the same team that also made Wolfenstein 2 on the Switch. I think that it was also
I'm not sure if it was the same team, because, I mean, I know they're all umbrellaed under Bethesda, but I'm not sure who the developers were.
Now I'm curious if I remember it wrong. Let's see. Yes, exactly. It says Panic Button does it again. That is what that is.
Oh,
what
you're
was-
talking who did the Nintendo Switch port.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. And for example, the YouTuber Spawnwave, he said like, Wolfenstein 2 is now on the Nintendo Switch, and Panic Button does it again. That's a play on the Doom port they did.
Yep,
So
because it was
actually
another
this-
successful one.
Yeah, another game like, okay, you ported Doom, but Wolfenstein 2 is way more detailed and more sophisticated. You can't possibly get this ported to the Switch in a good manner, and they did it again. It's like super funny. Yeah. Well, though the Switch kind of restarted the era of having weak systems again and making impossible ports possible.
I mean, well, honestly, Panic Button's kind of made a name for themselves continuing that trend. Like, I'm kind
Exactly.
of just taking a look right now at what they've done, and a lot of their work comes from switching things or porting things to the Switch. Like they did
Indeed,
Wolfenstein
indeed.
Youngblood, which was the I believe that's the latest. It was like that spin-off with BJ's daughters. Doom Eternal. I mean, I think that's awesome, though. I think more companies should be having Panic Button work on their ports.
Yeah,
I'm
perhaps.
fully for it.
Yeah.
The Switch needs more. Well, I mean, realistically, the Switch doesn't need any more. The Switch has a ton, but
Right.
bring as
right.
much to the Switch. Bring anything and everything. Because there's
Right.
that added factor, too, of the portability, which, I guess the novelty's kind of died down a bit with devices like the Steam Deck coming out. But I mean, the Switch kind of started that trend, and it's still kicking it.
That's a perfect segue for the next news item I have on the list, and that is Lenovo actually confirmed it shut down its gaming phone business line
They kicked it.
called Legion because it's not profitable enough.
I mean, to be fair, I blame that a lot on their marketing. Like prior to us discussing before the podcast, I had no idea that Lenovo even made phones.
And I had no idea either.
I'm very aware of the company. I know like the PCs and the laptops and tablets they've made in the past, but I didn't know they made phones, and I blame them for that. I should have at least known. I mean, it was an Android phone, correct?
Yeah,
so
sure. Yeah.
I really should have known that because I'm an Android guy. But I mean,
and just earlier today I've read that instead now they are making more additions to the gaming line of their laptops.
I mean, they're shifting focus where they've found success, which I think is probably for the best. I mean, it to me it kind of just comes off. I don't know if you're familiar with Razer, but Razer actually made a couple phones back in the day. I actually owned one of them. I had the Razer Phone 2. It had the Razer logo illuminating on the back of the phone, and it was really cool, and it was very strong for a phone of its time, and it ran games incredibly well. It ran them way better than any other phone I had previously had, but at the end of the day, as a phone itself, it was very cumbersome, and it was like glitchy, and I always had issues when it came to like texting or sending emails or answering a phone call, doing phone things.
Basic phone
So
things.
it was a gaming device first and foremost, and it ran really well, but it wasn't a very good phone, which is ultimately why I got rid of it after having it for like a year, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to be making another phone anytime soon.
But you are in this age group of typical smartphone gamers,
Well, not really, because and that's another reason why I ended up getting rid of the phone. I don't play games on my phone very often at all.
Oh, I thought you would, because you are basically
I don't like
a lot younger than me.
I mean, I'm an anomaly because a lot of my friends, a lot of the people in my, groups, they do like mobile games. I personally just don't. I've never been a fan of like the model of, pay to win, which is what a lot of them are. Mobile transaction or microtransactions, which are, everywhere nowadays, but they're like the main scheme on mobile gaming, and and ultimately just the games don't have as much substance as I would like. I prefer different types of games than what's offered on mobile, usually anyway.
But actually, I'm referring more to the AAA titles like COD or PUBG or Fortnite.
I don't play those either. You're talking like Battle Royale style games.
Exactly. And those are very famous on smartphones.
My favorite Battle Royale is Tetris 99.
So okay, I see.
That's my go-to.
Okay, yeah, you're very atypical there. Okay, I see. Okay. Because normally when people are like, "Do you play PUBG?" Yes. Do you play Call of Duty? Of course. And then they're like,
I used to play Call of Duty. I used to play online, and then I switched from playing, Call of Duty online with my friends to just focusing on the campaigns. And then I think Black Ops was either Black Ops or Modern Warfare 2. The original Modern Warfare 2 was the last Call of Duty campaign I played. And then I think I picked up Black Ops 4, and I played Zombies with some friends for a little bit, but I've kind of dipped out. I would like to play another Call of Duty, because I used to really enjoy the campaigns, but as far as like the online aspect of it, it's not really my thing. I'm more for co-op. If they introduced like a co-op campaign in Call of Duty that actually had a story and was more cinematic, like the single player aspect, I'd jump in there. But
Good point. Good point. Oh.
Just like the regular, it's just it all just seems kind of generic to me. It's like I watch people play, you know, like the newest Call of Duty online now, and it's still very reminiscent to back in the day, and I don't know, it's just not for me. Nothing wrong.
Interesting.
Nothing wrong with the people who do play them, because a ton of my buddies are online all the time. That's all they'll play, are those massive multiplayer online games, and that's fine.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So I totally judged you wrong here. I thought you are also keen on playing smartphone games. I mean, when I got an
I
iPhone,
played Mario Kart Tour,
of course,
and
who didn't,
Pokemon Go, like the first year it came out.
Okay.
I have a couple emulators on my phone, but like ultimately it comes down to I don't like the touch screen.
You don't? Oh.
I don't like the touch screen. I mean, it's
Okay.
functional for just using a phone, like web browsing and texting, but as far as like a controller goes, like I like having a tactile, buttons to press. I don't like that flat screen.
Wow, that's interesting, because many young people actually basically use it as their major gaming platform, which is like super inconvenient. But hey, at least you share my suffering there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Well, last but not least, I have one news left.
And it's sad news too.
Yes, it's a lawsuit against Hachet, or I don't know how it's pronounced. Hachet, or I don't know. You are American. You should know better.
I don't know.
You don't. Okay.
I'm terrible at pronouncing people's names. I try so hard, but
okay. Actually, yeah. Well, actually, they had a lawsuit with the Internet Archive, archive.org, and obviously they lost. And well, so now there is a risk that some books and some library stuff might not be allowed to be stored and archived digitally. And yeah. And the archive, I mean, we interviewed them a few years back. They really try to keep books in the loop that people are no longer interested in, that are not published anymore, or not there anymore. So not allowing them to keep storing and archiving those things would mean that certain books, might it be physical or whatever kind of,
get lost to history over time.
Get lost in history in time. Exactly. Yes.
It's sad. It's really sad, because the Internet Archive, their initiative has been really amazing for all types of media, video games, movies, music, books, any form of media. They've been preserving them, and it's especially in today's day and age, with the increased interest in lost media and things that were once available becoming lost over time. It's just a shame that they would be attacked and directly attacked.
Exactly. And well, I will throw some links in about how the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, is trying to defend the Internet Archive against this lawsuit. And I will put a link to that so people can learn more about it and how perhaps help with donations.
And if you're interested in it, there is a few petitions that you can sign.
Exactly.
And I would highly recommend it. There's also some talks right now if you want to start your own, I think it's like some kind of like rally at a local library. There's a couple of them that are going to be happening. It's definitely something to at least look into if you care about preserving history and preserving media, because right now this is mainly targeted towards books and the library, but ultimately this could foreshadow down the road what could happen with video game preservation and movies that are no longer being produced or released in physical mediums or streaming services. So
exactly, yeah.
Well, yes. We're looking at its books, and while we're, a video game podcast, it all goes hand in hand. It's all media that,
exactly,
if not properly preserved, is eventually going to get lost.
That's true. That's true. I'm really happy that you dug into those links I sent you a lot. Wow. I couldn't have explained it better even.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I've been watching, the Internet Archive for a while. I truly, I'm a very strong believer in digital preservation and like the Video Game History Foundation, which actually I believe that was the last podcast I was on when we interviewed Kelsey.
Kelsey Lewin, exactly, yes.
And I'm a very strong believer in that being something of significance of just to preserve history. And you may look at it as like, I'm from the opposite perspective of it's just people backing up games. But ultimately, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, when, devices that could natively play those games are no longer working or no longer readily available, it's nice to at least have some sort of preservation of the coding for the game, and just so it can be explored and used by generations to come.
And knowledge is so fast getting lost, especially in the gaming industry. I mean, when I knew that we are going to interview Frank Klepacki on my birthday, I told many of my gaming friends who are in their 20s or 30 maximum, and they were like, "Who's Frank Klepacki? What is Command and Conquer?" And I'm like, "What? You don't know?"
Well, I mean, people know what Command and Conquer is. I mean, there were Command and Conquer games on the N64, and it was still on PC back in like the 90s and 2000s.
Exactly. Yes. But people of a certain age, if they are not into RTS games, they obviously don't go back. And
I mean, I don't play RTS games, but I'm at least familiar with Command and Conquer.
Yeah, but you are different. You are
kind of a
historic. You are kind of a retro interested person going back.
I play
a
games
few
of
years.
all kinds.
You see, that's the difference.
Modern, old,
exactly.
everything in between.
Exactly, that's the difference between you and other people.
True.
Normal.
One of my best buddies. He loves gaming. He plays games. He probably plays games more than I do. But the types of games he plays are drastically different. Like going back to our other conversation, he plays a lot of battle royale games. He likes to play a lot of games online, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and that's fine. But he won't touch a game like Tetris, which is one of my favorite games of all time. He won't touch a game like that, or like a 2D platformer. Like they're just not his thing, which is fine. But it's just interesting because he and I are very close in age, but we have completely different tastes in gaming.
So you are very much looking forward to the Tetris movie coming to Apple TV Plus?
I am, actually. I mean, I have a feeling it's like the best moments were shown in the trailer. Like I'm very, keeping a level mind going into it, but it'll be fun. I have an Apple TV. I subscribe to it preemptively to get ready for that. So I am ready.
I was sheep. I got an iPhone 12 and I just kept subscribed after the 1 year free subscription was over.
That's how they get you. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, I was like, Severance, actually a pretty good show. I will keep the subscription. This is how they got me, Severance. That really.
I watched Mythic Quest. That was the one I watched. It's a comedy. It actually, so it's kind of like loosely based on Ubisoft, and I forget which game specifically. It's kind of like emulating, but it's the studio kind of struggling. They've got this open world MMO online game.
What's it called again?
It's called Mythic Quest.
Oh,
and it's actually, if you've ever heard of the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a lot of the creators of that show, like Charlie Day,
then I have to put it on my watch list
for that show, and a lot of them star in it too. It's a funny
show. Didn't know that. Okay, well then I have to put it on my watch list and watch it.
Recommended watch for anybody.
Interesting.
Anybody interested in gaming or just a fun sitcom to watch?
Well, sorry to destroy the fun here, but I interviewed Alexei Pechetnov a few years back, and it was not as dramatic as shown in the trailer.
Yeah, the movie's definitely going to try to make it more, to hit the masses. You know, you want everybody to watch it. People who aren't even really interested in Tetris are going to watch it just for that, like, that mystery, that sense of action and thrill, and, you know, it's happening during the war. And, but I mean, I'm interested in it on both aspects, you know, the hyping it up and also like the historical significance of it too.
Right.
Especially since I love Tetris so much.
Wow.
I'm really curious to see how they're going to, like, how much actual gameplay of Tetris is going to be in the movie. Because when they first announced it, everyone speculated the movie would be about bricks.
Blocks. Yeah, exactly.
Which I'm glad that that's not the case, because that sounds awful. But
hello, I'm the
this actually
T-block.
sounds again, but again, I'm just curious, you know, how much of actual Tetris is going to be represented in Tetris.
It's like the battlefields, where there is a section of 10 minutes where they actually play battlefields in the movie.
I actually never watched Battlefield.
You should. It got so bad reviews, but it's one of my favorite movies. It's
man,
funny.
I've gotten burned on so many gaming movies.
Yeah.
I just hope the Mario one's better than the original Mario movie with Bob Hoskins and Disney.
I'm also a fan of War Games 2.
Okay.
Which was only released for the box office, so only on DVD, never on Blu-ray, never in the cinemas.
Yeah, direct
I totally
to DVD.
loved that. Yeah, exactly, that's the term. Thank you. I loved the movie. I loved War Games 2. I actually find it better than the original, and I'm probably alone with this opinion.
That's okay. I mean, we're allowed to like movies that, you know, other people may not, you know?
Yeah.
That's what movies are for. It's just like gaming, you know, any form of media. You like what you like.
Yeah.
You know what? Fuck what other people
Hello, Professor Frank Falcon.
I tip my invisible glasses.
Yeah. Would you like to play a game? Yeah.
Actually, there was a Saw game. Actually, that just made me think there was a Saw game back in the day.
Ooh,
and I'm
not
pretty
into horror.
sure it received terrible reception.
Wow.
But I'm pretty sure it was like on 360. I remember playing like a demo for it on Xbox Live back in the day. Yeah, it was really bad, but it was fun. Like sometimes a bad game or a bad movie can be a lot of fun.
True. Well, I mean, it wasn't bad for me. I enjoyed Battlefields and War Games too. You know.
Well, to be fair, I haven't seen either of them, so I'm just going based off.
So I should make you a list of all the things you missed and you should catch up with.
Make me a list. There's some movies are like one of the things that I'm like really bad with. Like, I never watched Star Wars until maybe like 7 years ago is when I first like watched episode 3 for the first time, or episode 4, and I watched them in the order that they came out.
Empire Strikes Back.
Yep. And I liked them, but it just took me a long time. And like, there's still a ton of movies that I haven't seen. Like, I've still never watched any of the Indiana Jones movies.
Oh my God! My heart is bleeding right now.
The Matrix is another one. I played a little bit of the game on GameCube and PS2 back in the day, but I never actually watched the movie. I could go on. Like, I am definitely more into gaming than I am movies.
Wow. Well, the only movie I've never watched is the last release of the Titanic movie. I always skip that.
Wait, like a sequel to the Titanic?
No. I mean, they were Titanic.
Or like a 4K remaster?
No. They were Titanic movies before the one with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay.
Those I saw, but not the famous one with Leonardo DiCaprio. I didn't see that one. Yeah. Everybody was crying.
I did see that one, but I was so young at the time that like I don't really like, and that's the thing too. Like, I have seen some of these movies when I was like really young, but I don't remember much of the movie at all. So I kind of don't consider it me watching it. Like there's stories from when I was like a toddler watching the Goonies or not the Goonies, Home Alone, and laughing my ass off in my little stroller, but I've still never seen the movie. Like I don't. That's not really me seeing the movie. I don't remember the movie. Little toddler me might have been laughing, but I don't remember it.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Well, Spaceballs is another one you should put on your list.
I've seen that one. I have
you've seen that one?
Spaceballs. With John
Uh-huh.
Candy. Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, that's actually one of my buddy's favorite movies. He made me
Yeah.
watch that. I
What
found a
was it?
DVD of it. I told him, he's like, we're watching it.
I'm a Morg, half man, half dog. Yeah. And the rudder is jammed, sir. Oh, strawberry. And Pizza the Hut.
You know what? I probably not a very popular opinion, but I think now more than ever would be a great opportunity for them to make a Spaceballs 2.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
With Disney, you know, pumping
while
Star
Mel
Wars
Gibson is
out like
still
every
around,
year.
you know.
Why not? I think
Yeah.
why not?
I mean, Mel Gibson must be Stone Age now, 98 or something. I mean, he was already old when he did
I don't
the
know
first
how
one.
old he is. Let's see.
No, not Mel Gibson. I got.
I was gonna say Mel Gibson's only like 60.
No. I got the name wrong. Let's see who directed Spaceballs. I got that one. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks it was.
Yeah, he's 96.
96. Okay, 96, not 98. Mel
Yeah,
Brooks.
he could still do it. I mean,
Yeah. Mel
do
Brooks
one
it
more.
was.
I mean, and to be fair, I mean, it would obviously have a different tone, but he doesn't have to be the director of it. They could still make a Spaceballs 2.
Yeah, I just wonder, is he still healthy or did he?
That's a good
Great.
question. Who knows?
Let's see.
At 96 years old, I mean,
Oh, well.
just making it that far is like an accomplishment, I feel like.
Well, when I mean, what I always do is I do a Google image search with the recent year and see what kind of pictures. He looks pretty okay for his age. Yeah.
When was the last movie he made? That's what I'm about to find out. I want to see, because I have to assume he's retired.
Yeah, I remember.
No. In
No?
2021, he published a memoir titled All About Me.
You see. Oh.
And in 2021, he announced that he would write and produce History of the World Part 2, follow-up to his movie from 81.
See?
It would be exclusive on Hulu. So yeah, he's still active.
Yeah, I see.
So
Yeah.
Spaceballs 2. Needs to happen.
I still remember him from the scene where they were like, "Who are you? I'm an asshole, sir. And who are you? I'm also an asshole. And you, sir, we are all assholes. I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes." Ooh. Or another one
And
was
that kind of comedy still holds up today.
Yeah.
I mean,
gosh. Or instant video. And now we are on the now. Super silly, but yeah, that was it.
it actually makes me think: did Spaceballs ever get a re-release? Like, I mean, obviously it got a re-release onto DVD, but did it ever
Blu-ray.
get a release on Blu-ray?
It did. I have the Blu-ray. Yeah, I bought the Blu-ray of Spaceballs.
I may need to pick that up.
Yeah. I saw they made a Blu-ray release on the original Batman movies from the 60s. I totally missed.
Yeah, I have a couple of the older Batmans. Like I have I forget what year it came out, but the oh, now I'm drawing a blank on which one it is.
2014, I believe.
No, I'm trying to think of. No, it's much older than that one. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Now I gotta. I think it's just called Batman.
Yes. Yeah.
I think I might be thinking of it was like 80s, 89 maybe.
It's interesting that you missed the Spaceballs Blu-ray because it was released in July 2009. So at the beginning age of Blu-ray, actually.
Yeah, well, early on, I wasn't really early into adopting Blu-ray. My first Blu-ray player was my PS3.
Okay.
Which I I kind of had a PS3 in like 2008. I think I bought a broken one, or maybe it was like 2009. I had bought a broken one, fixed it. It had yellow light of death, but then it ended up dying on me again. I got rid of that, and then I didn't end up picking up another PS3 until the Slim, the first revision.
It's actually interesting that you mention it, because we mentioned HDCP, the HD content protection, earlier, because when we mentioned component connections that didn't have it. And I got a Blu-ray player secondhand from Samsung from 2009, so I got it a year later, 2010, a secondhand. And when the last HDCP encryption keys were pushed to the player in 2013, I was like, okay, in a few months down the road, I need a new player because they're not updating it anymore. And then they stopped making new encryption keys for newer Blu-rays. So I don't know why, but the industry kind of stopped doing it. So the last movie I actually had the problem of making an update to play it was Balboa, which is also which I also think is a Blu-ray release some years back now. It's super interesting. I was like, why did they stop making updates to the encryption, to the protection?
Maybe just because people were finding ways around it. I mean, like I know with the PS3, the easiest way around it was just to go online and just buy like a little splitter, just buy a little HDMI to 2 HDMI adapter, and a lot of them would just bypass that encryption.
That still works, yeah.
It still works. I mean, that's how a lot of people who stream gameplay footage, that's what you got to do if you're playing on an actual PS3. It's actually one of the reasons, because I don't actually own any pass-through device that disables that copyright protection. So like there was a YouTube video I wanted to make a few months ago, and I was going to record some footage on PS3, but I ended up not, because I didn't have, and they're cheap though. You can get an adapter for like $10 to $20. It was more of just me moving on and focusing on something that I did have.
Interesting that you mention it. Yeah. So you mean the movie industry just doesn't care anymore because everything is now streaming anyway?
It's weird because there's definitely been a decline in like theaters, especially, with COVID and the pandemic. That kind of was a stepping stone towards people avoiding that. And it's a shame. I mean, I'm part of the problem too, I guess, because I haven't been to the movies at all this year. I do plan on going to see the Mario movie though, so I will at least be seeing that. But like, I was going to see Ant-Man and the Wasp, the new one. I still haven't seen that. I figured I'd just wait for Disney Plus. And that's kind of, I feel like, what a lot of people are doing nowadays. They're just waiting for, it's like, why go to the theater, spend $10 to $15, see a movie, and then buy some overpriced food when I could just wait and it's on a streaming service, 4 to 6 months from that time that I already own, or maybe it's $10 to own that movie digitally, but you own it so you can watch it whenever you want. You're not limited to the theater. But at the same time, I personally think there is a charm to the theater.
Good point. Well, the thing is, for me, it's a bit more difficult because here in Germany, the first time that original versions, English versions, were on movies was actually Avatar in 2010. It made this big leap that now you could, after Avatar, you could get all the movies in 3D and the English original version. So I always pay more because I can't stand the dubbed German versions. So I always pay a little.
So you
extra.
prefer to listen to them in English then?
Exactly.
You don't like having the dubs. See, I'm the same way with other things. Like I'm not the biggest anime person, but there are some that I like. Like I was watching Full Metal Alchemist, and I ultimately though, I obviously, since I don't speak Japanese, so I had to listen to.
Shame on you.
I I don't like reading subtitles as the main form. Like, I'm okay with subtitles to supplement.
Interesting that you mentioned it.
Or
Most
like if
people
it's a
do that.
movie and it's
Yeah.
like a certain section of the movie where there's somebody speaking a different language, then I understand subtitles. But me personally, I just prefer, like, I feel like if I'm spending the whole movie reading a subtitle, my focus is more on the words than what's actually happening.
True.
So that's why
that's my problem too. That's my problem too. Yeah, and that's the thing. Whenever I went abroad visiting friends anywhere else in Germany, you always get, because they don't have an industry for dubbing movies, they always have English, but they always have the subtitles. I'm like super distracted by the subtitles because I can't read them anyway, but still I'm trained to look down and try to read it, despite I know I can't. And it's actually something disturbing because there's something moving down there that shouldn't be there. So I really prefer the way in Germany. And I believe we are one of the few countries where original version means really original version without added anything to it. No subtitles whatsoever. You know?
Yeah, I know. Is that still like a commonplace where movies are like edited for their regional release, like heavily edited? Like, is that still
for the TV? For the TV, before they come to the TV for free
TV
TV
makes sense because like our movies are even edited for TV. They'll cut out certain scenes because there's certain limitations that what can't be seen on TV and what can. So like nudity and things like that.
Yeah.
Cut from movies.
That's the thing. Nudity that's different in Germany. Nudity is no problem in Germany.
See, and what about like heavy swearing?
Also not. Also, so we don't have this beep 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 beep. We don't have that.
Well, I think our issue is like, or at least I think they've changed it over time to where now it's like after a certain time, stations can air things unedited. Because I know I've watched movies on like Comedy Central before, and there were definitely F-bombs being dropped.
We don't have things like F-bombs. Well, yeah, no. Yeah.
It's just a word.
Yeah, I know.
As it should be.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing in Germany. We are heavily against violence, but sex and nudity and such things are not a real issue. You know, of course, you don't have a porn movie in free TV, but you know what I mean. Things were
a lot more restrictive back in the day, though, because like I know, like with video games, even Contra, I know came out as Probotector. They made them all robots because it's if it's robot on robots, it's not violent, but if it's a human, then it's violent. So
that's actually still a thing, despite Bethesda had the permission to release Wolfenstein 2 without being removed from the German market. They still decided to make two German versions, one where Hitler was replaced by Heiler, which makes no sense, and one for Austria, because Austria speaks the same German language as Germany.
Which theirs was just the German language version of what we received.
Exactly. Yes. But it was sold so quickly, they actually didn't reprint the uncensored German version. That means when you are unlucky and living in Austria, you also got the censorship version. Yeah.
I mean, I guess realistically, like, it's not hard for people to put one and one together when playing the game, but at the same time, it's, I don't know.
Well,
I mean, I guess that's just German law, though, right? It's just.
No, it's not law. As I said, by the law, it was allowed because we changed the law a bit. But Bethesda.
Well, isn't there issues though with like storefronts, like wouldn't support selling like physical copies of the game if it.
But like, not at storefronts. Storefronts are not a thing anymore. Everybody buys online.
So there's no video games being bought in stores anymore.
Very, very rarely. Perhaps by people being 50 plus or something. Or
I mean,
you know.
So you guys don't even have like an equivalent to GameStop out there.
We have a German GameStop, yes. we have German GameStops, and they are actually in better financial state than the
ours.
American originals. Yeah, exactly.
Ours is doing terrible.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, but still, it's dying. We have two big electronic store. How do you say? Two big electronic store brands, you know.
Oh, yeah, like companies, like big box stores.
Yeah, called Saturn and MediaMarkt. And this year they actually unified. So now the stores are basically the same, and they are even having the same name, though they're now calling themselves Saturn MediaMarkt.
That's actually very similar to what happened in the United States with GameStop back in the day. GameStop was originally Funcoland, EB Games, and Babbage's.
Oh, I didn't know
and then
that. Okay.
Eventually they all merged into one, what became GameStop today.
Interesting, yeah. Yeah.
It's actually, I guess, not that uncommon for stores to do that, like to kind of eat their competition.
Yeah.
Or become their competition.
So who's going to those stores? Well, I guess people who are, I don't know.
I mean, like, I personally don't go to GameStop that often. I go, like, if there's sales. I do try to stop in, like, once a month. I still subscribe to Game Informer, even though I barely ever read it. But I go in there because you get the $5 discount every month. So I try to go in there and I try to find something. Like last month, I actually bought, I think it's on my desk here somewhere, I bought Mario Golf for the 3DS. So like I kind of go there and I'll buy like older games or like the games that are kind of being discounted down super cheap that they're going to like try to stop selling in the store. But I mean, ultimately, GameStop's kind of like, if you know you're going to buy a game day one, yeah, go there and get it. But otherwise, I mean, like you said, the internet's kind of the place to get things these days. Especially if you're going for a deal hunt, you know, it's going to be a lot cheaper getting a game from Amazon most of the time that's, you know, an older release than getting something from GameStop.
Just looking at it, there's even one in my city I never went to. So perhaps I should.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't really support like what's been going on in the background of GameStop. I know that they're like the upper people in like behind the scenes, things have not been pretty. Obviously we can see it from the storefronts that things are not looking good, but it's even worse behind the scenes. And I don't go to GameStop that often. I don't support a lot of their like scummy practices. Like I hate the disc only games. Trade-in values most of the time are a huge
I've heard about that, yeah.
But I do, when it makes sense, I do try to go in there and try to support them because at the end of the day, they are still a local business. True. And they're pretty much the only mainstream game store that we have left. I mean, actually, there's still a couple mom and pop shops, but as far as like the United States goes, we don't have another like brand. I mean, like I said, we used to have EB Games, Babbage's, FYE was a big one. Yeah. FYE, there's a couple of them left, but they're a shell of what they used to be. And the other three got absorbed into GameStop, which isn't doing well. So, like I said, I try to support them when I can, just because I don't want them to go away.
Actually, having a look, GameStop is around in certain countries: Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, France, Ireland, Canada, and USA, obviously. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I think that might stem from, because I think Babbage's was an international company. I think either Babbage's or EB Games, one of them, I believe, originated in the UK. So that makes sense that there would still be, that GameStops would exist elsewhere. I just hope they stick around. I just hope they're able to change their business structure and actually find a good middle ground between being profitable and not being scummy to your customers.
That's the problem with the American one. You are right. Well, I just look at it. In France, they're actually called Micromania. Yeah.
Is it still owned by the same core group, or is it just a different store?
Yes, it's owned by Sing.
Okay.
Which is who owns also the brand in Germany. So I guess it's the European brand owner. They just renamed it.
So it's probably there's probably a lot of differences in the structure of the business.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I haven't been catching up with, international GameStops. I just know that ours is not doing well.
Right.
They need to get their shit together.
I mean, honestly, I never checked that out also, but there was one exception when in 2015 GTA 5 was released, and I figured that Amazon France would pay the half for the PC DVD release. So I bought it from Amazon France and disabled the French subtitles, and there you go. I can play GTA 5 in Germany because they never dubbed the game. They just changed the subtitles you could select from. So here you go. I don't care that the writing on the box
Auto 5 too, because that game, shit. I mean, it came out on the PS3, then it was on the PS4, and then they made a PS5 version. So it made it through 3 generations of just getting pretty much stock releases.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think the PS4 version, like, at least released some differences, like that first person mode, I think was
true.
Next generation at the time exclusive, but I don't think they added anything for PS5. I think it was just a cash grab. Here's a slightly updated version, slightly better graphics, a little bit better frame rate. $60.
I actually found an error in the homepage. When you select Canada, the mouse over text says France.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, maybe because it's in French. If you click on the Canadian, maybe because I know French is one of their main languages.
Yeah, but no, it's English, but you can switch to French, obviously.
That makes sense.
Super. But it's super interesting. Yeah. Well, that was the first time when I was like, I don't care if the box description is in French. If I can save half of the price, I'm going to buy the French version. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. I mean, it depends for me. Like I do have I imported a copy of Game & Wario for the Nintendo Wii U from Japan because the US copy is going for, well, last time I checked it was going for over $80, but since the eShop's closure earlier this week, I'm thinking the price probably went up more.
Wow.
But I mean, I paid $30 for a sealed copy from Japan, so it just made sense for me there. I could get through most of the game. I have a modified Wii U, so I can play, region-free games.
Yeah. Yeah, now that you say it, I also got some VR versions of the Tetris, the original Tetris. The original Tetris for the Game Boy in Japan. Yeah, I got it here. That actually has a different music than what we all know. Yeah.
Yep, the first release of the Japanese Tetris.
Yeah, and I actually got 4 of them. Here are 2, and I got 4 of them.
Why do you have 4 of them?
Because one seller in Spain found me so nice as a buyer. He told me the tricks how to detect the differences on eBay photos, and here's another seller selling it for $5, and here's another seller selling it for 10 euros.
Fill me on that, because I have a whole shelf dedicated to Tetris, but I don't have the Japanese version. I do have a complete in box US copy of Tetris, which is very hard to get.
I also got a complete in-box Japanese version from the original.
Well, the issue with the US one was when Tetris came out, most people bought Tetris bundled with the Game Boy. That was the package.
My parents,
and it didn't come with a box.
Yeah.
So when they actually did release it, like the version I have, I think is like the equivalent of like a greatest hits version.
Yeah.
It was like a re-release, like at a discounted price, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I believe those are like the more common boxed copies. I don't know if any like black label, I guess is what it would be considered, versions of Tetris in a box exist even. I would assume they do.
It's similar with the NES here in Germany. Most copies were with the three cartridge.
The three
cartridge.
that came with Tetris. What was it? Track Meet in Mario?
No, it was International Soccer, Nintendo International Soccer.
Ah, okay. The World Soccer.
World Cup. World Cup Soccer. Yeah, Nintendo World Cup Soccer, Super Mario Bros. And Tetris. Yeah. And the Tetris version in box for the NES came later to the market. And I think that was our version of your dual cartridge with Duck Hunt.
Well, so we did get there was a third a 3-in-1 cartridge later down the road. I off the top of my head I don't remember which one. It was Mario Bros. It might have been the 3 games it didn't have Tetris in it. I think we did get World Cup, Super Mario Bros. And then another game down the road. But the more common one was just Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt, the one you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to look that up now, the 3-pack that came out in the US.
No, I got you there. People are like, what are they talking about?
Oh, yeah. People who don't know about multi-carts.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt and World Class Track Meet. That was the 3-in-1 that we got.
Never heard of that one. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that was actually, I don't know if it was bundled with the system or sold individually on its own. I would assume it was probably bundled with later release NESs.
Okay, if I search for multi-cartridges Germany on Google,
you're gonna just
NES.
get a bunch of bootlegs.
Yeah, I'm just getting
Yep.
AliExpress, Etsy, eBay, bootleg.
Yeah,
stuff.
so the way I found it, I just typed in the 3 games that I thought were in it until I found it. Because if you type multi-cart, you're gonna get mostly bootlegs.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like the term multi-cart really wasn't coined in an official capacity anyways. I feel like those were just games that included multiple games in them. They were compilations, right? Compilation's kind of like the official term, and then multi-cart is just what kind of got coined when, like, even back in the NES and Famicom days. Like the Famicom specifically, I know had a ton of multi-carts.
And now you are lucky that those multi-carts we just spoke about were easy accessible. Some multi-carts on the NES required you to press the reset button multiple times to switch between the games.
That makes sense though, because it kind of had to like reflash the little flash memory on and it could only had enough to store one game at a time. I know. I think I actually have. I'm gonna have to look because I like collecting if I see bootleg games out in the wild that are dirt cheap. Like it's just kind of fun to see some of them. And I have a Game Boy cartridge, and it's got a physical button on it that you would actually press to reset the game. So you'd press it, and then it'd be one game. Turn it off, press it, it would be another one.
Wow. Okay. Never. Well,
it's an old one though. It's an of era multi-cart. It's from the 90s because I have some newer ones that came out down the road, and they kind of just have like a bigger shell, and they actually have a menu, and you can pick the games.
Wow.
So, like a traditional.
Well, if you could tell me what it was with the button, I would be totally interested in owning one. That sounds interesting.
I can send you a link to them.
They are still made?
Yeah, you can still, if you just search on eBay for Game Boy multi-cartridges, you'll find one eventually.
With those buttons?
With a button.
I've never heard of.
I mean, to be fair, I haven't looked. I haven't like searched on eBay in quite a few years. Because I kind of just pick them up if I see them in person. I don't really go out of my way to pick up multi-carts anymore. Because if I want the game, I'm just going to buy it in official capacity.
Interesting that you mention it. I only heard about it, but I don't own an NES cartridge where you have to press the reset button to switch.
I don't
the
have
game.
any NES multi-carts either. I do have a Famicom one, but it's a newer one, I believe, because it came with like one of those Super Joy plug and play game systems that were just a Famicom on a chip, and one of them actually, one of the ones I have has a Famicom cartridge slot, so it had built-in games, but then it came with a cartridge that just said game system or game or something, and then that had a bunch of other games on it.
The so-called NOAC, NES on a chip.
Yep.
Which
I haven't heard
out.
that term in a long time. I frequented the Ben Heckendorn forums, which Ben Heck he modded game systems. Presumably still does. But I was on that website almost every day looking at like the custom mods people made, and most of them were Nintendo on a chips. They were just because they were the ones that you were able to shrink down to the smallest form to fit into other devices.
He would be a potential guest. I should try to contact him and see if
I'd love to talk to him. And
awesome.
I mean, I'm sure I probably sent him a message or something back then, but
he was famous.
It'd be nice to talk to him, see what he's up to.
Yeah, he really stopped his Ben and Heck show and stuff, right?
The one that was on what was it? It was one of those bigger YouTube channels.
Yeah. He stepped down a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, to be fair, he probably is doing things I just haven't checked in. Life's been busy. I do have his book though, because I was planning on making a custom modded. I have a Game Boy Micro that the case is really busted on it. The headphone jack doesn't work. The back of it was sliced open with a knife. So it's in rough shape, but it works. And I had the plan years ago to stuff it into a Super Nintendo cartridge, and just to have fun, because the Game Boy Advance was kind of like a portable Super Nintendo. So I thought it'd be fun to put it in a Super Nintendo cartridge. So I bought his book, and I was planning on doing something, and I just never did. I don't trust my soldering skills enough, or desoldering skills for that matter.
Yeah, well, he still has a YouTube channel, but only 185k subscribers.
It's more than I got.
Yeah, and mostly videos that are re-uploads, but also some new projects that weren't mentioned in the Ben Heck show. But, well,
I'm gonna have to check out his channel after this.
Yeah.
Catch up on it.
I have to find if I can find an email address and say hey Ben, would you like to come to the show? Oh yeah, well he has a homepage, benheck.com, so he probably should be easy to.
Oh, I'm so happy the forums are still up too.
You see?
I don't know, they're not very active though. Last post looks like it was in 2022.
You see?
Yeah, but I blame that on it being forums. I just feel like forums kind of got overtaken by Discord. Back in the day, they kind of got overtaken by MSN Messenger and AOL, and then it shifted into, Discord today.
Yeah. What he still does is single-handed controller.
Yeah, he makes accessibility controllers.
Exactly, that's what he's still doing, yeah.
Well, that's awesome that he's still doing, because that's what he was doing, I believe, the last time I checked in. I know he makes them they're custom made for specific people with specific disabilities or missing limbs, or he's able to take whatever motor skills they do have and translate it into a controller. And I think that's awesome, because I know Microsoft made their accessibility controller, which opened up possibilities for people to play, but I think it's awesome that somebody like Ben Heck has dedicated their skills to that.
Definitely, yeah. Well, we really nerded out today. Wow. He asked me how long is this going to take, and I was 25 minutes, and now we are almost hitting 2 hours. Okay. We had a lot to talk about.
Good thing I canceled my appointment.
Ooh, you did?
Yeah, it wasn't anything important, so it was. I didn't cancel. I rescheduled it.
Ooh, nice.
No biggie.
Okay. Today we have another guest, and actually we will have a few guests later. But we start today with Jon Artigo. You are the screenwriter of the upcoming movie about John Captain Crunch Draper called Employee 13.
That's what we're putting it as right now. But as it goes, when you start developing stories, you have a working title that you use just to kind of work through it. And then as you get down the road, you change the name or something is just a better name. But right now Employee 13 is cool because it's, related to Apple and, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of interesting things about all what happened back in the 70s and 80s.
I actually read somewhere that this was the employment number he actually got at Apple. That is, we were the 13th employee from Apple.
That is how I understand it to be as well. But I feel like I think if you go to Wikipedia or somewhere, there's somebody else listed as like the 13th employee at Apple. So there's some discrepancy there. So it's part of what is interesting for me in terms of just some of what I have to do is fact finding. I got to go and talk to different people and look at different things because, when you write a screenplay, you're trying to take something that really happened, but then you're trying to also make it work in a narrative on screen. So you always have to adapt and change and adjust little things, throughout to really make it work. But when it comes to certain things, you want to nail those things and you want to make sure that those facts are as accurate as possible. Otherwise, when people watch the movie, they're going to be like, wait a minute, this is, I heard something different. And then it becomes a whole nother thing, which, we don't want that.
You're actually working for Mayet Media, and you are currently running a Kickstarter to get the funding for the movie.
Yes, that is correct. What we're trying to do initially is we're just trying to get a treatment and a screenplay. That's kind of like the first step, because once you have all that situated, then you can go out and you can find investors or funding or look at potentially attaching actors and things like that. And those are all little things that you put together to try to get the funding for a movie.
Super interesting. You guys contacted me first. I got an email someday like, hey, there's a new Kickstarter coming up. Like, okay. So somehow you found out about me first.
Yeah, I assume that it's from Craig and from the people at Mayet Media who just who did some research and looked around, and certainly with people who are fans of John Draper, who are knowledgeable of, Captain Crunch and all that kind of stuff. Then yeah, those are the people they're looking for to get the word out, so that people know that we're trying to get it together to get a real feature film made about this man who has done some really, really interesting things throughout his career and certainly early on. And there's certainly a lot to talk about that goes beyond the technology front, but just the human side of things and the challenges that people face just going through life, trying to make things happen. So as a screenwriter, as a storyteller, there's so much there that you can pull from to really make something interesting and compelling to viewers.
How did it happen? I mean, did you, crash into the toilet someday and then had the idea, like, like Back in the Future, the flux capacitor one day or something? Yeah.
It didn't quite happen like that. Obviously, there are other stories that I develop in that way, not in that exact way as you described, but where I just have like a brainchild of like, ooh, I have this story I want to make. And so I start just writing the screenplay and I put it down. In the past, what would happen is I would write a movie about just something I am motivated to write a movie about. And then I would go and get funding, and then we would get the movie made, and then we would get it distributed, and that would be that. And then another time I would come up with an idea for a TV show or for something like that. This is something where Mayet Media contacted me and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Would you be interested in coming on board? And I didn't know much about it. Now, I grew up in California. I grew up in Sunnyvale, which is part of Silicon Valley out there. Los Gatos High School is where I went to high school. So a lot of places where Jon Draper was when he was young, and you know, I'm 51, so still my childhood was the 70s and 80s in Northern California. So, you know, just learning, I knew obviously a ton about the industry because I grew up out there in Silicon Valley. My dad is an engineer, and he worked at, you know, Fairchild Electronics. He worked at a bunch of different places with a lot of different people, and then he started his own company called Pineapple Technology. And he was building transmitters and amplifiers for radio towers and things like that. And you know, my dad's retired now. He's 86, and but it was just interesting because I had known a lot about that industry. So when they were talking to me about Captain Crunch, and I started researching it, and I started looking into it, and then I read Craig's book right here. I read his book, and I was like, oh my God, there are so many. Like, Jon Draper is like, you want to make a movie about this guy. You want to make a movie about him. It's so like I said, it goes beyond the really cool technological things that he did. It's his mannerisms. It's the struggles that he faces. It's the Draperism, as he calls it. It's, you know, everything that that might go wrong will go wrong, like his mentality. And it's, you know, there's so much that you can play with from a story perspective. So when I started looking into it, read the book, I was early on, I was like, I am absolutely 100% on board. And so it's just been, you know, reading, researching, I'm watching videos that they have of like the homebrew club that would meet, I think, in Menlo Park, and they had a meeting recently. And then it was like a reunion meeting, and I watched this on YouTube. I think John has a YouTube channel that I think that he was putting it up there, pieces of that.
He did actually. Yeah, I saw it. And even Steve Wozniak was in it, which is interesting because as I said off the recording earlier, he visited me a couple of times because he has friends in my city. So at some point he visited me like 2 times in my life, and he always said that he has the private phone number of Steve Wozniak, and we all thought like, yeah, of course, but actually the call would never go through. So same with his book. He would say, for 7 years, 8 years, I'm working on my book, and everybody was wondering, will it ever come out? And eventually it did happen. So yeah. So
Steve Wozniak, I met with Steve. I want to say about a month and a half ago. We had a Zoom meeting and talked. And it was great to get his perspective. I definitely plan to talk with him many times as we get through the process. Like for me, really to dive in and get started, we kind of have to get the funding to be able to get the script written. But even just in the little bit of research that I've been able to do, as we're such at the beginning stages here. It's the things that he would say, and something that stood out to me that Wozniak said was, he said that Jon Draper was like an inspiration to a lot of the early pioneers that went on to do very, very big things. Whether you're talking about, you know, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or any of the people that were just involved in Silicon Valley in the 70s and 80s, he was an inspiration because he was always trying things. He always had a different way of looking at things, and just his, you know, journey of trying to do something sparks ideas in other people. And that's why Steve Wozniak saw him as such an inspiration to a lot of young people who were getting into computer technology and whatnot. So I find that fascinating too. And he had so many great stories about Jon and just about what he meant to him.
And the controversies around Jon Draper didn't disturb you?
No, I mean, I've learned that you live a life long enough, there's always going to be certain things that are going to come out and be there. And again, it's like, okay, it's hard to, you know, it's why like I want to look at who Jon Draper is, like who is he socially? What type of person is he out in the world? I think that people have a different perception of every situation. And so, anytime somebody is feeling like something happened to them, obviously that always needs to be addressed, because you got to take those things serious, because everybody deserves to be heard and all that kind of stuff. So I think that that's very important. But you also never know exactly what's going on and exactly what happened. And when you understand a person, just like you might have a friend who somebody says, oh, I think he was kind of rude because he said this. And then you're like, oh, well, that's just because you don't know him. He didn't mean it in that way. And then as you know somebody, you tend to understand them better, have compassion for that person. And I feel like with Jon Draper, I think as people get to really understand the type of person he was, the struggles that he had every day in his life, just from a social perspective, I think that that's gonna mean something to them. And they're gonna get to know Jon Draper as a person as we make this movie. And then people can decide for themselves what they want to think about things based on, how we present this. Because we want to present an accurate portrayal of the type of person as a human that Jon is.
I would I would sign that totally. I mean, I had the same experience knowing him as a personal friend. He was totally not like the media described him,
Right.
So in his as a private person, he's totally different. One of the nicest guys I know. So I'm very happy to be one of his friends. So I totally get where you're coming from. But I also see why Jon always says I'm a celebrity, but I'm fallen off the face of the earth for those VIP organizations because nobody wants to work with me. And he always struggled to find recognition. So it's awesome for me that you are standing up and saying, we are making a movie out of Jon Draper's life. And as you said to me, it will not be a documentary. It will be more like an action movie or something.
Yeah, it'll be not an action movie necessarily. An action movie would be like if he was, trapped on the top of a tall building and he had to fight a bunch of terrorists to to survive. But
so not like the upcoming Tetris movie.
Yes, it's a live action is what they would call it. It's a live action movie. It would be sort of like, there's been the Pirates of Silicon Valley, there's been Jobs, there's been different movies about, that era. What I think is fascinating about this is, and I was talking to Steve Wozniak about this, there's a lot of things you could tell a very chronological story of Jon's life, and you can go through a bunch of different things, and you could, but what Steve Wozniak and I both agree on is when people see movies about these things, what they really want to see is what happened in the 70s and like the early 80s. How did that all happen? How did it come together? Like that was the pinnacle of all of it, like everything happening, coming together, and what was to come after that came after that. But you take the big players, and I think most people would argue that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are probably like the biggest names coming out of that time, right? Obviously, big, huge role that Steve Wozniak played. But you go, Jon Draper as a person and the influence that he had on people in a roundabout way, like I said, directly led to sources of inspiration that pushed everything forward. And to go to that time, that era when everything was exciting and new and the future was like just open in terms of what it could be, you have a story about not the main key figure from that time and not the other main character, but just a person that was off to the side over here in the corner of the room, which is totally Jon Draper to be over here in the corner of the room. And to do a story about that era, but about this person off to the side over here that, doesn't get a lot of the fame and notoriety at the time and even later in life, I think is a really fun thing to play with. And that's, that's what we're going to do with the story. We want to kind of focus on that era and really have it be about that time and the things that were going on. And we want to incorporate the stories of what was happening in Silicon Valley at the time. And, so that's what we're doing all the research about. But we feel like in terms of, from a viewer perspective, from people who are a fan like you and people who just are fascinated about things like someone who would come up with something like the Blue Box and do the things that happen, I go, this is exactly what people want to see about. They want to learn more about this time. They want to get in the trenches and they want to feel what the fun was like and what the mystery and the dream was like. And that's, I think, where we really want to play with that.
I mean, what's also very special about Jon is how open he is to people in general. I mean, I interviewed him 11 years ago, and then he was like, hey, in 2 months, I'm actually in your city meeting friends that are living like next street to you. Should we meet in person? And like, oh my God. Oh my God, Anybody else would be like, okay, normally we have this interview and afterwards it's like, okay, now we move on, So he's very open and welcoming, and it's really good to see that you want to draw a different picture than what much of the media is portraying him like. They are most focusing on scandals, and stuff. And it's so sad because, as I said, he has so much different sides that nobody portrays. I wonder, by the way, the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
How is that going to happen? I mean, is there a backup plan in case? I mean, there are still 36 days to this day.
Yeah.
Is there a backup plan in case you have to do it a second time around, or?
I'm not too sure. What I can tell you is that the people at Myatt Media, along with myself, like, we really believe in this. I mean, we really believe in this. So we kind of got together, started talking about it. We said, oh, let's do a Kickstarter. But okay. I think that there's other options if it doesn't work out. But I think
Indiegogo, for example, where you have flexible funding. You get all the money even if you don't receive 100%, because Kickstarter is all or nothing. That's why I'm asking. And it would be so sad if it was so close and you would give up on it,
Well, here's the thing. We are definitely going to keep pushing the Kickstarter, and we definitely want to raise the money that we need to get it done. Because if we raise the money on the Kickstarter, then that means that, in a matter of a few months, we're going to have a fully completed screenplay ready to go to take to, Warner Brothers or Sony or whoever is like, Netflix, whoever's like, I really want, this movie. We have the ability to take it anywhere at that point. So our plan is to keep pushing it and do that. If something were to happen in the end and we weren't able to meet that goal in some capacity, then it would not end there. It wouldn't end there for me, and it wouldn't end there for Myatt Media. Like, we're definitely behind it and pushing this forward. We've already put time into it and care, and we're all very passionate about this. So we're not going to be pushed away very easily from making this happen.
Just asking because, especially for Kickstarter, sometimes you need 2 or even 3 tries, Yeah. I mean, I had interviewed people like famous composers and stuff, and for whatever reason, it almost worked out, but it didn't fully, and they had to find the motivation to try again,
Yeah.
And to find new ways of pushing this, and then making it finally. But it's not always working the first time around. And many projects are unfortunately dying because people are getting demotivated too easily.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't strike me like a person like that, which is good, yeah.
No, and when you get, as you have stories, people bring stories to me a lot. Usually I do the stuff that come out of me, like, oh, I really want to tell a story about such and such. And but when someone comes to me and brings it and I look at it, oftentimes I'm like, not sure it's the right fit for me. But as I was reading through this book and I was looking at all these things, and I was like, everything, like, my dad worked at the linear accelerator in the Stanford Linear Accelerator. He worked there. And then, they're talking about how Steve Wozniak and Jobs went there to access the library to get like the information to see that the what was it, the megahertz or whatever however they figured out that what John was saying about the phone stuff was true. They had to go to a library that only existed at the linear accelerator. And I'm like, it's so weird because my dad worked there. And then John living in Los Gatos for part of the time, like I went to Los Gatos High School, and like being in Silicon Valley, there were so many of these things. He even talked about living in Los Angeles. I lived in LA for a while, obviously being a filmmaker and a director and a writer. And he was talking about this Bob's Big Boy that he would go to. And I'm like, that's the Bob's Big Boy that I would go to all the time. You know, Starbucks
Awesome.
right next to it. So every time I would read on, I'd be like, this is the same thing. And even talking about clear quartz crystals and the frequency. My wife owns a crystal shop where she sells crystals and things like that. She's been telling me all the time about the vibration of crystals, the frequency of crystals. And then I'm reading this book and I'm like, oh my God, it's the crystals. And she was telling me about crystals and watches and, you know, all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it's just so many things come together to make this feel like, oh, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. This story is something I'm supposed to be focusing on. Doing interviews like this with people like you is what I'm supposed to be doing. Because we want this to happen. We want this to get going for sure.
But you mentioned in the emails earlier you're interviewing people who know John. So at some point you also have to interview me because I also have some stories from the time I met him in person. So
yes, absolutely. I'm going to add you to that list because I basically just sit and I talk with people and I go, so tell me just what are the first things that come to your mind about your experience with John?
Oh my God. Yeah, I have some crazy stories. I don't know if you would put them in a movie, but there were some crazy things, you know.
Yeah, well, we won't know until we talk about it, and then we can see what works for sure.
Right. Okay, good. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Steve Wozniak because I'm trying since 12 years to interview him, and his assistant always tells me he's too busy.
Right.
So perhaps if you have a chance to ask him if he would do an interview about his history in computing with us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely bring it up. I know that he's I know that he was something happened with like the house where they were living in Colorado or something, and then they had to move back to Los Gatos or something. I don't know. There's been a little bit going on with that, but I think him doing it, you know, obviously he didn't do it for me. He did it for John. You know,
right.
He did it for John. He's like basically, hey, if I can do anything to help out John in any capacity, then he's going to do it. And so for him, that was the draw.
Awesome. Well, very interesting to hear this all. So, what are the next steps? I mean, aside from the Kickstarter, what are you doing right now?
Yeah, I think that the next steps are just kind of what we're doing a little bit by little bit, which is just doing more research and talking to more people. I know I have it on trying to get in touch with John's brother. We've been playing phone tag a little bit. And so there's other people I want to talk to, but it's part of what we need the funding for is to do more, is to really dive in and put the time and energy you need to put into the research to talk to all the people. Because with all the people I want to talk to, including you, it's going to take a lot of time, you know, to be able to do that. And so that's where the funding is really important and comes into play, because it means that you can just focus on that and you don't got to worry about all the other little stuff that gets in the way where you got to make money here and there. You're like, hey, this is my full time, like I've got to like work on this, focus on this. But I'm still doing research. I still do a little bit. I've read through the book. I'm reading through it again. I'm still looking through anything that I can find online. I'm putting rough ideas of outlines together. I'm just not getting fully involved because my wife and I just wrote a screenplay that we sold to a director, and the movie starts going up like in about a week, shooting in New England. And so there's other things that are happening. So trying to like kind of juggle all of this is sort of where we're at, you know, right now. But once we can get the funding locked down for this, I'm going to be able to push a lot of those other things aside and then just really focus on executing the treatment.
Awesome, awesome. Well, so you said you would like to spend with me half an hour talking about it, and then I would jump to John and Craig if he ever finds his way to the internet.
Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if his internet is working, but I think you can try to bring John into the conversation.
Yeah. Should I do it right now? Should we?
Yeah. Just if
right.
I don't know if you can just kind of add him or.
Oh yeah, sure, I can add him. I mean, he is using his old Skype account I saw, so I already have him on my contact list.
Oh, that's great.
Which is interesting because you said he's not using Skype, but he's using his Skype account.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, so I just add him now. Let's see.
See if we get him.
Hello, John.
Hi.
Hi. We can hear you. That's amazing.
Oh, is this going to be done on audio or on video?
Well, I will make a video version too if you want to show yourself. It's up to you, really.
Are we going to do a video version later, or do we do the audio on video now?
It would be on video now.
Okay, hang on.
Okay. There we go.
Okay,
Hi, John. Hi.
How you doing, John?
Hey, John, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm not sure if Craig's going to make it or not. We're still I think he's dealing with something. I don't know what.
Poor Craig. Always has problems with technology.
All right. Hey, so I surprised you a little, John. You didn't know that I would do this call today, right?
We're involved with my media.
Awesome. Yeah, well, Mayat Media found me and sent me an email like, hey, there's this Kickstarter coming up with a movie about you. And then I was like, oh, well, I have to talk to them, of course, definitely. So it's good to see you again. Amazing.
Yeah, good to see you. I've been meaning to talk to you for a while because I've been getting really and deeply involved with AI, especially with ChatGPT. I know how it works. It's a very, very sophisticated neural network, along with things like transformers and attention transformers, utilizing that technology, along with all kinds of other very sophisticated internal mechanism that makes it all work, language processing and things like that. It came in really useful one time. I had a tweet come in. It was all in Japanese, so I fed it to ChatGPT. It not only translated, but there were words in there that it gave me several different meanings of the word. So it's pretty good.
So let's talk a bit. How was it for you, John, to get approached by Mayat Media that they are doing a movie about you? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, I'm very surprised, and I'll definitely want to work with them. Definitely 100% work with them. I've been out promoting the Kickstarter, and I've been tweeting it really heavily on Twitter. I don't get a lot of people respond to the thing that I do. Let me give you an example. I offered to write a Bluebox app for the iPhone, and just as something kind of a novelty thing. Okay, you know how many responses I got back? I said anybody interested in any Bluebox app for the iPhone, and you would think that maybe a couple of interested people would want one. Nobody came back, not even one person. So go figure. It's crazy.
That's exactly what I said to John earlier. It's nice that he is interested in working with you because you always tell me like how you are a celebrity, but you fell off, you fell out of the community, and now it's hard to get recognition. So it's really great that with Jon Artigo you found somebody who wants to do the movie and give you some fame back, I would say.
Well, I started a YouTube channel, and I recently posted a recording of a Zoom meeting that I had with Steve Wozniak and Lee Felsenstein and a whole bunch of other of the old original homebrew people that originally attended the homebrew meeting. And I was really amazed, you know, that I thought I'd get a few, at least 1 or 2 extra subscribers to my Patreon, and not one subscribed. But I did put out a very interesting thing, and you could watch it on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@JDCrunchman999, and that's my YouTube channel, and you can go up and watch all of my videos. I did a bunch of videos on a bunch of stuff.
Well, I just wanted to say I saw the video that you are referring to, and the other John actually mentioned it during the interview earlier, that you actually met Steve Wozniak and all the other homebrew club members from back then.
It was really, really a hard task for me to get everybody together at the same time on the Zoom meeting. I failed in certain respects. I failed to get people like Daniel Kotke. He couldn't make it. He was out on some kind of whatever. I tried to get Alan Baum. I've written many, many times to him, and he never responded. He would have been a really great addition to the meeting. I hope to do another one. I hope to gather some people together in the fourth community and have a series of the history of fourth. I've been trying very hard to get a hold of Charles Moore, the creator of fourth, in this Zoom meeting. And everybody has different schedules and everybody does different things. So it's really difficult for me to kind of pull everybody together because everybody's got different schedules, you know. And that's sort of the way I'm doing right now with Cyber Cowboys, which is a group I'm affiliated with, doing artificial intelligence stuff and other applications involving AI. And it's hard to pull people together. And, you know, even with everybody having mobile phones, everybody has their different schedules. But it would be easy to do it. They just don't do it. For instance, if somebody's like on their way somewhere in a car or in a bus or train, they could still engage in a Zoom meeting anytime, anywhere in the world. It's just that they don't do it. And that's one of the things that it's very difficult to do. And I'm not only one to having that problem. Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, John was just mentioning that he's spending a lot of time doing all those interviews to find out stories about you that other people would tell him. And that's really something that takes a lot of time and is time consuming. But I guess it's more like we as humans, we prefer to sit down and take something in a, you know, relaxed manner than being on a bus ride and next to that being in a Zoom meeting. So I totally understand where people are coming from. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And especially, I guess the problem is that we are all getting older, and you know, now is the best chance to make this movie. Yeah. Well, let's hope Craig can have some time shortly, because I don't want to wait too long, so people have enough time to pledge for the Kickstarter. You know.
Yeah,
it's kind of urgent, I would say.
yeah. I think so. Yeah, we want to get stuff going.
Yeah.
So we did talk a little bit about, you know, when I talked with John, we talked a little about the movies that he's seen and stuff. And you know, one of the funny things is that, you know, he talked about he wants to know who would play him, and he wants to be involved in who what actor plays him, which I love that he says that, because, you know, he was thinking about the Pirates of Silicon Valley. He didn't really like the guy who played him, and he was upset that nobody asked him, you know, nobody consulted, you know, with him.
Do it or what?
Yeah, we are still doing it. John is leaving us, but that's fine, so I can concentrate on you. It's good.
Yeah, well, I have a little bit of logistical bullshit I have to deal with right now. So this was totally unexpected. Hang on just a second, please. Thank you. Hold on. I didn't want her to hear me, but the witch is coming. The bitch. The real bastard bitch. This is the one that's trying very, very hard to get me shipped out of here, to ship me to a place called Americana. And you know what's in Americana? Crazy people. It's a mental institution. They're trying to put in there. They're looking for every single little minor infraction. For instance, if I show up for breakfast without my hair being combed, they'll give me an infraction.
Interesting. Jeez. It's okay, John, and I'm sorry that you're dealing with what you're dealing with, and I all I can do is hope that things improve for you in some capacity, and I'm just sorry that you have to deal with that.
Listen, you know what will improve? Okay, money, money enough to get me out of here. Okay, that's what I want.
Okay, well,
move in with a caregiver,
right?
One or two people that can be caregiver, not in a group home, but as a group of people where they have all these strict rules and regulations.
Well, hopefully the movie is a success, and this can help in this way of form, shape or form. I don't know. But...
Yeah, well, so the book sales are just tanked out. They haven't been doing very much at all. I mean, maybe one or two sales a week. I still have a few books left. I think I'm not sure what Bill Rex got left of my books there. He's the one that's selling the book. I can't do anything. I had a whole lot of swag here. I had to move it out. They moved it in the garage. It's all mixed up with a whole bunch of other stuff. Swag that I could sell and get money for. I just haven't been able to do it just because of my physical disabilities. I can't walk and do everything in a wheelchair. I've got a grabber stick that allows me to be able to grab things I pick up off the floor.
Yeah.
And I have to have taking a shower. I have to have assistance. And, I have to have special equipment in the bathroom. I have to have a butt wiper. I have to have a special commode that allows me to be able to wipe my butt and clean off. They won't even let me have a bidet. A bidet would be perfect, but that's not allowed. It's the cleanest way. That's the cleanest way to get poop as a bidet.
Yeah.
That's still here.
Well, I will do my best to promote this Kickstarter, and as I said, I will catch up with Jon Artigo, and we will do our best, John and I, to help you. I guess.
Please do. I mean, I don't. I mean, this place is just so fucked up right now. No privacy, drama all the time. Constantly people coming in my room in the middle of doing a YouTube. But I'm sorry for the bad production in my.
No worries, John. No worries. I will edit this perfectly fine. Don't worry.
Just out of curiosity, what video editor do you use?
I'm using Movie Edit Pro Plus from Magix.
How much does it cost?
It costs 80 euros per year so far.
Oh, so what is it? A web-based editor?
No, it's actually a Windows program.
Oh, okay. I'm using DaVinci Studio.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of it?
Okay.
John.
Yeah.
If you heard of DaVinci, check it out. I had a free trial. It worked really good for the free trial. They say it's free, but then after using it for a while, all of the features that I used to have all disappeared.
John, can I ask you a few questions about the movie and what you?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
sure.
Please.
I would like to know what kind of actor
are you actually well, what kind of actor do you want to play you in the movie?
Well, there's going to have to be several kinds of actors, actually. A young actor and an old actor. So that there's times in my life where I was young and, in the military, doing stuff like that, being really active physically, exercising. Even the point that I saw you in Germany, I was pretty active. But and then an old actor, one that will play me. You know what I mean? That will look, like me. Okay. I'm not in. I don't have anybody in mind to take my role. I don't know any actors. So it's going to be up to you guys to pick an actor. I mean, I would like one. I would like one that knows me really well. I'd like to be able to collaborate with this actor. About the small little intricacies of my life, things that I do that, like I left-handed. You know what I mean. I want to be able to have an actor that will be similar to me in you might say, I can't describe the word, but similar to me in just a lot of different ways. And I like that actor to be knowledgeable enough in electronics to fairly understand a little bit about electronics in the day. I'm not expecting them to be like at my level, but I am expecting them to at least understand some of the very fundamental basics of both programming and what I've done. All that, I think that would be important. I don't know when you're gonna do casting, but whenever the casting process starts, I'd like to be involved in it in some way, either through a Zoom call or whatever. It doesn't matter because I can only be Zooming. I can't just be physically going out anymore. I can't even fly. I can't go anywhere. I can't be physically on set. I have to be on set virtually. You know what I mean? When the actual, acting and actual movie part takes place. I'd love to be on set during that part of the movie. It would be really great, I guess I could fly if I got a medical release. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it. To ask for donations for my, GoFundMe, and I might lucky if I might get about maybe anywhere between $50 and $150. I'll get usually about my donations are anywhere between $5, $10, maybe $15. I'm getting about $300. That's still not enough. That's still not giving me things in the red because I still have my Patreon, okay, which is like $300 for my Patreon, which is not enough. Still, I got to get more Patreons. I got to get more people to join my Patreon so I can get money for my YouTube channels. And I'm just not making a hit out there. I'm not being noticed. I'm not being, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. You know what I did as an experiment? Have you ever heard of Jitsi, Jitsi, the Jitsi program?
Of course, yeah. I know Jitsi.
So what I did was I published my Jitsi on Twitter, okay? It says, hey, come on and talk to me. Here I am. You guys want to ask me any questions? Guess how many people showed up? Guess how many? Guess.
3, 4?
Not even one.
Oh.
Not even one. And that's 10,000 Twitter followers. And not one person came on that channel to talk to me. Not even one.
Well, John, I really hope when the movie is out that this movie is going to help you, That's
what happened when YouTube. I mean, Me Too'd. I got Me Too'd. That's the reason. I got Me Too'd. And because of that, it just totally destroyed my reputation. I have no reputation anymore. I'm banned from all of the different conferences. I can't go to DEF CON. I'm banned from there. I'm banned from Beyond Hope. Several others I'm banned at. I can't go. There's this. It's an iPhone thing called the developers. Let's see. It's a. I can't remember what it's called. But
You mean the Apple Developers Conference, perhaps?
no, I just do that online. They got all the conferences online. I just watch it there on YouTube. No, it's a developers camp. It's a camp of developers go to. I got banned from that. The only thing that I could take advantage of is over the network, over online. Like I can watch most of the DEF CON online.
Mm.
I can't only very, very small portions of the let's see, it's called the Black Hat Conference, White Hat Conference, Black Hat Conference. It's a week before DEF CON. I don't know that I've been banned from that. I think I probably will. But the thing is, it costs $3,000 to go to that. And only one or two of the Black Hat sessions are available on YouTube. I've got access to most of my YouTube accesses. Like I got access to. Hang on just a second. I'll give it to you here. It's a really good source for knowledge and information. Hang on a minute. I just can't remember. My memory's just going bonkers. So hang on a minute. I got access to Prime Video. That's mostly where I get. Oh, it's called Skillshare. That's it. Skillshare. Skillshare. Yeah, one of my fans gave me a subscription to that. I got a subscription to Netflix through my Alan. He gave me access to his that gave me all the entertainment that I would. I wished I could get back on Helium again. I could make $500 a month, but these bastards won't let me put up my Helium antenna.
I heard it. I heard it earlier. Yeah.
I've got HBO Max. Just his HBO. And that's pretty much it as far as it goes. Yeah, I got Paramount Plus.
Yeah, I also got Paramount Plus recently.
So that's and I'll Discover Plus. Great Plus. All these channels I have been getting from other users' accounts. So, as long as they're willing to pay for it and they're willing to share access to their media, I can do it.
Right.
And I've got my YouTube. YouTube is YouTube Prime. What do you call it? YouTube Prime or whatever.
I don't really remember, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah. All right, John. As I said, I really have to go, but it was nice talking to you again, and I really hope things will work out for you. Right.
Give my regards to all the other guys in Mannheim, please. And,
will do.
Later.
Talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Today we have another guest, and this time we have Craig Wilson Fraser, who is also the ghostwriter of Beyond the Little Bluebox. That was a few years ago. And now we are talking because you also help writing the screenplay of the upcoming movie Employee 13 that's currently on Kickstarter.
Right. I mean,
Awesome.
the Employee 13 is a working title because technically John Draper was never a formal employee of an Apple computer, but he was listed as employee number 13 for a long time until I can't even remember the other guy's name, but until someone else said, I was employee number 13. And then it was discovered that John Draper was always, you know, a freelancer, like a contractor. But I mean, he may as well have been employee 3, you know, like he was there at the beginning, and so
All right.
it's almost a joke title. Yeah, okay, we're employee 13.
Right, like a bit like Friday the 13th, but without the bad luck, I hope.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So let's start perhaps a bit. How did you get involved in tech and so on, and how did you actually meet John Draper, aka Captain Crunch?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I wouldn't classify myself as much of a tech person, although I've worked online since the early days of the, you know, what people call the World Wide Web. I think me and John Draper made a website in 1994. There was only a few thousand websites at the time, you know. But I'm an artist, and so I always consider myself kind of like I'm working on the computer, but it's never my real main thing. But yeah, I was you know, pretty good at I went to the school in the 80s, and I was pretty good at you know, really basic programming. So I had a kind of a half an interest in it. Met John Draper through our mutual love of dancing to techno music. And so he was, I saw him a few times in nightclubs in San Francisco when I first had gone there in the 90s. I went there to show my art, and here's this old guy, like older than everyone else and really unusual. And then I think the third time I saw him at any rave, he was speaking at this kind of like external part of the rave. It was like across the street in another building, and people were speaking about various things, you know, like hemp, ice cream, and technology in some respect. And here's this guy talking about the World Wide Web, which again in 1994, everybody kind of was like, huh, okay, you know. There was websites then, but for normal people, it was still kind of a novelty. And I felt sorry for him because like everybody just lost interest in what he was talking about, and he was so enthusiastic about it. Like he saw the future, you know, like he well, I don't know if he saw the future, but he was always, his mind was always where things were gonna be, you know. So yeah, I approached him and said, go on then, tell me about what you're talking about, you know. And so within a short time, we were roommates. I had an email address at a time where you said, oh, have you got an email address? And people said, nope, you know, so.
What is that even?
Yeah. Yeah, so like you exchange email addresses with like the 7 people that you could find that also had an email address. But yeah, that's, you know, and I just you know, got to know him through that, and then we started working together on some really basic graphic design, and you know, I mean, we're talking about when you made a website, then the image would load line by line, like a you know, 2x3 inch image would take like a minute to load, you know. So there's very limited things you could do as far as web design, colored background and choosing one of the 4 fonts you could choose or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know if that was, I forgot the exact question you asked me, but that's how I got to meet John Draper. I didn't know anything about him. I used an Apple IIe at high school, and so I meet him and he starts talking about, you know, Steve Wozniak and the founders of Apple, and I think, is he full of shit? You know, like, I don't know. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing. That's the same thing when I met him first in 2014. He was like, yeah, I got the phone number of Steve Wozniak, but he would never answer the phone if he wanted to demonstrate it. And so it was always a big bit of a question, like, what's really happening around there? Especially when he said, like, yeah, I'm doing my book, and everybody of his friends here in his city were like, yeah, let's see if that ever comes out. So I was very surprised when finally, I'm not sure, was it an Indiegogo or Kickstarter funding campaign, crowdfunding?
We did a Kickstarter first.
Yeah.
That made enough money to pay we did self-publishing, but it was like a really kind of high-end self-publishing where it was, you know, you're basically buying you're basically paying the publishers to publish it for you. Let's just call it that, you know. So it was the difference between like actually having a publisher interested, which we could have, there would have been publishers interested, but we decided to go that route. So yeah, it was going to cost us like, I don't know, 12,000 just to get kicked off publishers. So we ran the Kickstarter first, and then we ran the Indiegogo just to basically keep selling the signed copies, because we had ordered so many of them from the publisher and signed, you know, like however many thousands of books, and we didn't sell them all. So we just we ran the Indiegogo not to raise money after the Kickstarter, but just to really have a platform to keep selling the books. But yeah, I approached John. I knew I was going to write his book a long time, like in 2006 or something like that. I just felt like I'm going to write this guy's book and I'm going to make it kind of like a comedy, because being with him is a comedy of errors, you know, like he's such a character, and you end up having to have humor and having to look at the humorous side of everything that happens, but with this knowledge that this guy is the real deal and like he has this amazing history. And so I thought, you got to make the book entertaining, you know. Otherwise, you know, like I'm pretty sure the other ghostwriters that gave up, at least one of them probably went, nobody's going to be interested in this except like, you know, 1,000 techies in the world who, you know, it's not enough to sell a book. And then the other ghostwriters, I'd know that one of them gave up because he was just too difficult to kind of communicate with, you know, on a regular basis. But because I've known him, when I started writing the book, I'd already known him for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I was in regular communication with him anyway. And I knew how to, I edited his website for years before that. So I knew how to look through his text and find the meat and get rid of the ramble, you know.
Yeah,
So
I mean that's actually the very interesting part of Jon Draper, that beyond his being special and seeing things differently than other people, I remember a few years ago, suddenly I saw him making a live stream, a speech about how he turned around and spammed spammers, you know.
Spammers.
Exactly. And it was to such a detail, down to the very basic of emailing and mass mailing, that I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant, you know. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I remember when he came up with that tool.
I was surprised how brilliant he is. That's super amazing.
Was that the Spam Crunchers project?
Yeah.
So every one of his projects have crunch in the title, right? It's like web crunchers, spam crunchers.
So it was just amazing. Or that one time he gave an interview with what was it called again? RT. Yeah, Russia Today.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
So whenever he does something tech based, it's super brilliant. It's really like, wow, this goes so deep, you know. So I mean, yes, his two sides actually.
There's a video of that I've got. It's actually on Getty Images, but it's a little video clip of and it must have been in like just before I met him, early 90s. And he's talking about basically social media. You know, he's for him, it's just an idea based on the technology underneath it. But he's basically talking about social media, like how, you know, years and years and years before that anybody had a concept of it. He just his mind just doesn't work like other people. He just he sees a vision of something that's possible technologically, and doesn't really care about the social aspect almost.
Indeed, exactly. That's I totally get it. Yeah, I totally get it. So when I hosted him here in my city, that second time, 2015, I had to learn to take things differently. And and he also has this energy, at least back then in 2015, where everybody was like, oh my God, everybody around here is tired because it's 11 p.m. and we want to go to bed. And he's still like, hey, look at this. And this is amazing. And we're like, John, we should find a place to sleep and go to rest, you know? And he would still be full of energy, like, no, look at this, you know? Like, John, we don't have time anymore. Let's go. And I mean, everybody else was tired and wanted to end the day, but John was still going on.
Yeah, he's getting much older now, so he's keeping a kind of like it's the first time in his life he's 80, and it's the first time in his life he's keeping a regular schedule that people would call normal. Because I mean, when I met him, he would stay up for days, you know, he would just be like, didn't need to sleep or something. Just keep drinking coffee and energy drinks, and wow, you know.
Yeah.
But he's only recently starting to go to bed at a normal time.
Yeah, that's actually very true. Yeah, and I think his biggest problem was that Wi-Fi in hotels isn't really in the dimension of speed that you could do calls on Skype and stream on Netflix at the same time. He was super pissed by that. And I'm like, John, the Wi-Fi in German hotels isn't meant to make video streaming with Skype and run a Netflix show at the same time, you know. Especially in 2015 when Netflix in Germany was just starting to be a thing a year ago. Most people wouldn't even know what Netflix is here in Germany.
Wow, okay.
You know, because because Netflix was in USA obviously, and then in Latin America first, and then Germany and Africa came a lot later.
I remember when Netflix started in the US. Well, the early days, I was living in Tucson, and it was when they would send you DVDs. So you'd they would DVD come in the post, and you'd watch it and put it back in the mailbox, and it would get picked up. And then I kind of I just didn't follow it for a while, and then suddenly it was all online, and then they were this huge. I mean, it's how quickly they became such a huge entity.
Yeah.
But it's funny that John, he's been around since obviously before any internet, and yet he still somehow expects things to be as up to date as he wants them to be, you know. You would think he would be more understanding, like, oh no, it's not working, it's not that fast here yet. But he's like, well, why isn't it that fast here yet?
Exactly. So perhaps let's talk a bit about how will you help John, the screenwriter, to make the movie more, meaty, meat to the story.
Yeah, well, John actually, I like working with John, Jon the screenwriter. I keep saying Jon the screenwriter, because straight away, as soon as he started describing he thinks in scenario, like he thinks in visual scenarios. Like we're working on another project together right now, and as soon as he describes something, you can just visualize it as a movie. He has a way of just, and so he could see when I wrote Draper's biography, I always saw it as a movie as well, because I like I say, I was in all these situations with him over the years where I just thought if someone was filming this, it would be hilarious, you know.
Yeah.
But partially hilarious and partially almost painful, that painful comedy that has become popular in recent years, you know.
Yeah.
The Office and things like that. Awkward comedy. But so John, the screenwriter, just the way he worded how he saw it was exactly how I saw it. So it's great working with him. I mean, you know, again, we're trying to get funded. There's all these elements to, you know, even if even once the screenplay is written, the treatment is written and all that, there's these other elements that you've got to get through to get something produced that, you know, we don't really necessarily understand, but he does. And, you know, to get it to that point might need some funding, and so we're, you know, obviously trying to get funding for that right now.
Yeah.
But I'm really hopeful that he's the man. He's the guy to do the screenplay for sure.
What I also found amazing about Jon Artigo is that we were in a call with Jon Draper while he was in his care home, where he is right now, and there were constantly nurses pissing him off. and Jon was very pulled together and emotionally supporting at the same time. I was like, what an amazing mix of personality.
Yeah.
Anybody else would have been either pissed up and hang up because of what's going on behind Jon Draper, or would have been bursted out in tears. Even I had a lot to take to pull it together.
Yeah.
And the interview with Jon about the screenwriting, Jon Draper, about his role, well, as his life is portrayed, turned out to be more like a talk between friends, because all on his mind were the witch, as he calls it.
The what's going on behind him, what's going on where he is. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was only able in 1 hour to ask one question regarding the movie.
Yeah, that's not
so I was very impressed. And shortly before Jon Artigo went and left the call, he was like, okay, so you have 5 minutes from this section of the interview and 15 minutes from me, and then perhaps you have an hour from Craig, and this way you can put together your podcast show. I was like, okay, so you're already planning for me how I'm doing the edit. That's very nice of you.
Yeah, that sounds like him.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing about Jon Artigo that I liked is, and I think I wrote this in the book, which is, and I've never met you, but I almost feel like we could have met at some point, because there's a few people over the years that managed to, you know, have the patience to let Jon Draper be himself. And I've become close with a few of those people because we share that empathy and patience and tolerance and all that. And Jon Artigo, although he's never been in the physical company of Draper, he gets it. He gets
exactly.
The best way forward is just to sit and go, okay, are we good? Are we, you know, and just keep being patient. And any friction just causes more friction. So,
exactly. Yeah. And Jon Draper always calls it Draperism.
Yeah.
All the bad things in life are only happening to him and to nobody else.
Yeah, I mean, we could almost have just called the book Draperism. It mentions it so many times that.
Yeah. And even to this day, Jon where he is in his care home,
Hmm.
John Draper. It's very difficult to speak about two Johns at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get it right. He still has the energy, and he's hoping to find funding to get people taking care of him and
Yeah.
make him able to travel again.
Yeah, he's still, I mean, good for him that he's
Yeah.
still thinking like that.
Yeah,
I
he's
don't
still
think,
restless.
yeah,
very
I don't
restless.
think he will get anywhere anymore than that way, but it's good that he still feels, he's still looking forward, which is
Yeah.
kind of amazing. I just spoke to him on video chat the other day, and he was on a minibus in Vegas going to like some kind of physiotherapy session or something like that at the Veterans Hospital. And he's just like he's the only one on the bus, and he's shouting to the driver. He's just like shouting at questions to the driver, and she's, you know, this like African American lady like shouting back. Even that was entertaining. You know?
Yeah. It's like Sister Act 3
Yeah,
with the bus driver.
yeah,
Yeah. Instead of singing, they are shouting to each other. Yeah.
yeah.
Anybody else would have been embarrassed. And
Oh, he has. Yeah, I wrote that in the book. He has. I've never seen him but I've never seen him approach embarrassment. He was like, I thought, is this, I don't know, God, I wrote so much about that kind of thing because the amount of times I thought, is he aware of how embarrassing this probably is for everybody else? And he just doesn't care. Or is he not aware of it? Or, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, look, at this point, maybe I should say, like, when I had this book in my head for a long time, and I wrote it between 2014 and 2017. John came to Spain in 2015. We worked on it together. Even toward the end, I mean, so, you know, there's talk now that, of course, he was diagnosed with some form of Asperger's, which is a, you know, a common thing for high functioning tech people, you know.
Exactly.
But when I wrote the book, I wasn't trying to make fun of that. You know, I didn't even know about his diagnosis that happened in 2002 or whenever that was. He didn't even mention it to me, you know. But you know, other than some movies like Rain Man or something like that, there was very little social awareness of that kind of stuff when I first met John, and so I didn't want to write the book in some kind of retrospect, like, oh yeah, he has this you know, condition or something like that. I just wanted to write it like a, you know, he's a character, and he's funny, and he's extreme, and all these kind of things. But I am aware that people now go, well, but he has Asperger's, so, you know, are you making fun of him? You know, it was never like that. It was never making fun of him, you know?
I guess perhaps to be that brilliant on the tech level, on this extreme, you have perhaps to have another condition. Otherwise, you cannot make your mind function that highly to concentrate so much on the technical aspect, you know.
Yeah,
because you are busy with the other stuff.
Yeah, it's absolutely a part of his thought process, in that he switches into this, you know, nothing else matters mode. I mean, it's I don't think he would exist if he didn't have that condition, let's call it. Yeah.
Yeah. At least not to this brilliance level.
I've got my own opinion that about that kind of thing, which is I think almost everybody's on some kind of scale of something like that, and you know, a lot of people are kind of masking to try and be normal and all this kind of. I've got my own theories about that, to where John Draper is just someone who's blatantly himself and doesn't care about any labeling or anything like that. He's more interested in what he can do. You know,
I don't actually know what it was, but there was a trash news site, I totally forgot its name, who were making up things about his physiotherapy sessions. about touching people in the wrong way, and then he got delisted and
Yeah.
blocked from all the tech events.
Yeah.
I totally
I mean,
forgot what it was.
I can tell you the absolute details of that if you want to know. I mean, nothing like that was going on. Nothing like the way that the stories started to come out was brought out by a few individuals on social media, and then BuzzFeed picked it up. The main
BuzzFeed was it exactly? Thank
Yeah.
you, BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
I totally forgot the name. Yeah.
So a lot of this goes back to Jon Draper has a long-running feud with a hacker group called Cult of the Dead Cow. They hate him. He doesn't hate them, but he doesn't like that they are anti him in some way. It's some really trivial thing about they were smoking at an event and he told on them or something like that because he's allergic to tobacco, and that kind of started it off. And then okay, so he does do this exercise program. He does it, well, not now because he's too old to do stuff like that, but back in the day, I mean, within 10 minutes of meeting me, he said, I can make you 10% stronger, and he's got these techniques of like muscle, like pulling your muscles in a certain way, rubbing them in a certain way, and then doing these exercises, and it kind of works. It's like applied kinesiology, which is, according to Wikipedia, that's discredited, but I can tell you it works. Anyway, he used to do that with everybody, like
I know.
three people a day, at least 3 people a day, right? So you think about the thousands of people he did that with. A few of them, myself included, I was on some psychotropic drugs the first time I was in his presence, and
wow,
I was like, oh, what's this? This is weird, and so there's a few people that had that experience and decided that he was trying to, molest them or something like that, because he has no. He doesn't really take people's cues very well. If they're uncomfortable, he doesn't pick that up. Again, it's part of that kind of autistic kind of element to him. He's a bit oblivious to people's discomfort.
exactly.
So there were, I mean, I would be surprised if there was like dozens of people that probably had a negative experience about that. But this day and age with social media, you get people saying, "Hey, he did that to me, he did that to me. Oh yeah, that's that weird old guy that used to go to the parties. Oh, that's that weird old," and it just spread like that. And then there was like this, like I say, this hacker group. Now the journalist for BuzzFeed, Kevin, maybe I should mention his name. I don't know if that's libelous or something, but we traced him back to the Cult of the Dead Cow. He's like,
wow,
yeah, and so he was the one that really kicked the whole thing off, the kind of, we called it a smear campaign. Okay, I mean, we understand why a few people were, originally uncomfortable with Draper, but the when it became this media thing, it was totally a smear campaign. And once that kicked off, he got banned from DEF CON and a couple of other things. Oh, I say banned. He got disinvited because he would be normally speaking at those events, right? And so they just, of course, reacted to, oh no, oh dear, there's this thing in the media. We better react to that,
right.
Oh,
to not start a shit show.
Yeah. So as soon as it went from kind of like this almost obscurity in some sense, other than the tech community, to as soon as he was being, I mean, like when we were writing the book, we were on BBC News, and so it was becoming like because he's had an effect now on everybody in the world in some respect. His inventions and his ideas have had some effect on everyone. So that's quite a big deal. That's quite a mainstream thing. And as soon as it kind of became this mainstream thing, the haters just kept at it and at it and at it. And so he got basically, I mean, we had a movie deal set up before this one. We had a movie deal halfway set up with the guy, I can't remember his name, but he made the movie Dallas Buyers Club was a pretty high-profile movie producer. And of course, when that thing happened, and it was at the time where the Harvey Weinstein thing and all that, so anything that was ever
That
said,
Me Too thing, yeah.
suddenly it was, don't touch that anymore. So everybody went, don't touch Draper anymore, and that was it. So it just got dumped.
Oof,
I mean,
yeah.
again, I could say he would be right. He would be right in saying that's Draperism, because it's bad luck seems to have followed him his whole life.
Yeah, of course, being touched in ways that are not normal for the average person here and there can be a part of physiotherapy. So I was like, when this scandal from BuzzFeed was coming up, I was like, holy shit, have they ever been in a physiotherapy session themselves? You know, such things happen when people, when the therapist and you as the patient interact physically.
Yeah.
We are not robots where every movement is 100% controlled.
Yeah.
And so this is like super bullshit, you know. On the other hand, I would never think that this was intentional or something, you know.
Combine that with the fact that he was, you know, he was very involved in the rave scene. So you had like thousands of young guys like me, you know, at the time, a little bit high on something or other, possibly ready to be paranoid about anything, right? It's a bad combination.
True.
You know, I've never done this type of physical thing before, and I'm on acid, you know, so
wow. Yeah.
And John never had any concept of that. I mean, he would be on, I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to say all this, but I mean, he was taking acid and all this kind of stuff and going to raves, and he was kind of oblivious to someone else having discomfort of something. He was just having a great time, you know.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, as you said, you mentioned such things in the book. Did he take it badly, or did he take it okay?
Well, I mean, he's still. It's hard. That's a hard one because he's obviously affected by it, and he doesn't really understand why that's became a thing, you know, and he has no idea how to communicate his way through it. We had to try and help him deal with the media a little bit when that all started to happen, and it didn't work well. It kind of it felt like he was making excuses rather than just being honest.
Yeah, and those things made it even worse. I had the feeling.
Yeah,
actually,
I think it did, but we didn't know what else to do because when he was left to his own responses to things, he was being manipulated by these journalists, and so they would ask him things in a certain way. So we felt like we had to try and help him get through these interviews and stuff, and it wasn't going to work one way or the other. They had the agenda that they had, and that's how the media works, isn't it? You know, they've got the story and they're going to make it fit with no matter what the answers are.
Yeah, social engineering is the term.
Yeah.
The media is doing a lot of social engineering, while a person who has autism or Asperger or something along those lines, who is, as you say, as a doctor, in the spectrum, you know.
Yeah.
You don't get it. You don't get it as such a person. So you are totally falling for it. Yeah. And of course, a journalist knows that, you know. And now there's this thing between, do I get the story or am I a good human and let it go? And most people in that field who are in it for the long run, they would probably go for the story, you know.
Yeah, that's what they're there to do, right? They're just
exactly,
especially with people like BuzzFeed, which are just a tabloid. I mean, they're just like anything they can get their teeth into that'll sell, that'll get clicks.
Exactly. Well, as I said, from my point of view, as a patient myself for physiotherapy, I don't think there was any meat in this accusations.
No,
you know,
just people with memories of being panicked.
Yeah.
As
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, if that was a thing, then physiotherapists around the world would be scared of being sued because they touched their patient in the wrong way for a second or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's you know, nobody would work in this job anymore if that was a problem, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate because, you know, like, it's a story. His story is a story that's going to come out eventually. It's going to be a part of history. It is a part of history. So it's the fact that there's these weird blocks of this weird judgment on him as a person, you know, that are in the way of his story being a part of the general story of. I mean, it's almost like they like to skip over him in some way, and yet his actual peers, like, I wrote this in the book, like when we were at the homebrew reunion in 2001 or something like that, and his actual peers, the actual other homebrew guys, the guys who were in there at the beginning, they really like him. They really admire him. You know, within that inner circle, he is considered an idea man. Like, he was right in there with the ideas, when, you know, that, and they knew that, you know, but they're gradually, those guys are dying off as well. Only half of them are still alive. And so outside that inner circle, the perception of Draper it just gets more and more diluted, you know, but hopefully his story, like, I mean, I wanted to write his book because I kind of knew nobody else was going to be able to. And I also wanted to make it entertaining, to kind of get the tech out to people who have no idea about tech. And I also wanted to at least have something out there in existence that tells a few details of this man's influences on the tech world, you know.
Now I wonder, how are you planning to tackle those dark parts of his story with Jon Artigo? Did you make plans for it with the BuzzFeed thing? And well, and obviously he also said he was delisted from many talent managers since he was in jail. So basically he has been cancelled before cancel culture was a thing, you know.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
that multiple times in his life, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he used to say that before any of this modern stuff happened. He used to say, "Oh, I've got a red flag against my name," you know. Like 20 years ago, he was saying that. 30 years ago, he was saying that. So, when it is partially true. I mean, you know, he did some prison terms for various things, and yeah, he kind of always has had a red flag against his name. Jon Artigo and I, when talking about the film, we were really not focused on those negative aspects at all. I think they'll get covered in the manner that they deserve, which is like almost a side thing. Like, well, there's this side thing, but we're really focused on
obviously
his story and the you know, the kind of difficulty of being a guy like him in the world where, you know, people have for a long time kind of craved normality, you know, like, even although we worship inventions, we somehow want people to be normal, you know, like, if people were all normal, there wouldn't be anything to do or look at. There wouldn't be TV if everybody was, you know what I mean? So it's quite bizarre, isn't it? Like the so yeah, we I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, we want to focus on, like, the difficulties he has had and other people have, you know, other people. There's lots and lots of people like Jon Draper who have difficulty communicating with the world the way it is and have something to say and have something to offer. So we want to kind of portray that a little bit as well. But the dark stuff, yeah, we just consider that, well, that's that's a misjudgment, and that's a misdirected thing, you know. But we'll cover it. It'll be covered for sure. I wrote a little bit about it in the book, but I just, you know, I don't want to give it too much.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, perhaps since I was in a school for handicapped people myself, being surrounded by many people with Asperger's and autism and stuff, I probably have an easy hand, easier than others, to handle people like Jon Draper, and look behind the troubles he has socially and see the core of his personality and his brilliance at the same time, you know. And it's really cool to be able to talk with Jon on a friend level, and yeah, it's super amazing. I never thought when I read the book Hackerland, which is a German book by Ephraim Sem, about the story of Jon Draper. I think I read it in 1998 when I was 16. I never thought I would actually be friended by Jon Draper, have his phone number and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then actually meet him a couple of times in person in my life, and he would actually come to my city and all this burden, you know. I mean, you know, 2015 he already had some physical problems, so all those little complications of booking a special train booking for him, so he would get disabled person assistant from the German train company and all that stuff. It's super complex.
I bet, yeah.
And everybody would have said like, oh God, this is so complicated, fuck it, I will just cancel my trip and not go to Germany. But he was like, no matter what, I'm going for it, you know.
He's just got more determined. He just makes
like,
it more determined.
What it's hard to do, that means even more I have to do it, you know.
Yeah, that's his personality.
And when we were going out, we always had to plan ahead, where is the next bench, so we could make a rest in between. Was super complex, but we all adjusted and made our best to make him feel as comfortable as possible, you know.
That's great. I mean, I like, he was here in 2015, and even although I talked to him, you know, a lot, I haven't been in his actual presence since then, since 2015. And he had some mobility problems then, but yeah, I mean, most of my time spent with him in person was before. I mean, he had back issues from the time I met him. You know, he had the back issues from a long time before that. But he had plenty of energy when I knew him in the 90s. You know, it was more to do with but he always had his. If you were going somewhere with him, before it was he needed a bench to rest. Before that, it was, where are we going to be able to get that, and where are we going to go be able to, and then I want to smoke some pot, so where are we going to go to do that? So even before he had the physical agenda, he had another agenda of, where are we going to have breakfast, because I need to eat that at that time. And then
exactly yes.
He had an agenda always.
As a host, you always need to be planned. Everything needs to be planned out and stuff. Yeah. I remember we were in a cafe in the city center, and it was a French cafe, and he was totally pissed that the menu was in German and French and not German and English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he totally attacked the waitress for it.
Yeah, that's surprise me.
And she felt so sad for it that she tried to translate everything that was written in German or French in English for him, and he was still not happy with the assistance.
Oh, that's painful. Yeah. I mean, the amount of waiters in California who I've given a look to, like, I'm sorry. You know, just that look like, I'm sorry, it's just the way he is, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here in Germany, people have their cellular data plan, you know, and even John had his Vodafone data plan SIM card,
Right.
so he was good to go, right? But
Yeah.
he would still ask the
If they have
waitress in the
Wi-Fi.
Chinese restaurant for the Wi-Fi code.
Yeah.
And
Like
and
it
that
means
was
that, you know, yeah. I
and that
know,
was
I know.
only for the cashier system,
Yeah.
because they had tablets for caching and stuff.
And he probably asked
for
for the password anyway. Can I use
Exactly.
that anyway? Yeah. 'Cause
Exactly.
my data plan's just not enough.
Exactly. And the waitress was so rolling eyes and pissed and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, hopefully they don't think that I told John to ask for the Wi-Fi password, you know. Yeah, but
he really loves Germany, though. I mean, from the time
I know.
I mean, he used to go to the Love Parade in Berlin, and I think he always said Frankfurt was his favorite city in the world. And I said, "Why do you love Germany so much?" This is before I'd ever been to Germany. "Why do you love Germany so much?" And he said, "Because everything just works right there." You know?
Except the trains. The trains are always delayed or cancelled.
Well, that's everywhere's like that, isn't it? But he likes that everything makes sense. Like there's something about the German logic that everything's where you expect it to be, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The accuracy of Germany. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
I lived in Tucson, Arizona. After I left California, I lived in Tucson, Arizona for 7 years. And I have different groups of friends from Tucson. And there's this weird coincidence that a number of them have moved independently to Germany.
Wow.
Which is kind of a strange thing for like a desert town, like Americans from a desert town moving. So I've got two friends that moved to Leipzig, one friend that moved to Berlin, this is all like independently. They don't hang out with each other. They just all to Germany.
Okay.
So I feel like, to me, I feel like I've got this strange German connection, and I'm like I say, I was in Leipzig. I did an art show in Leipzig a few years ago, and I just thought this is my favorite place, you know. And I came back to Spain and said, we've got to move to Leipzig, but we never did, you know. Life down here is very too easy. It's beautiful. The food is good. The weather is good, and it's hard to leave. But I do love. I'll be happy to come back to Germany at any time. Well, I found Leipzig to be. I immediately started taking trams, and like within a couple of days, and I felt like I started to get to know the place. We have a kind of a good life here, so I just have to put up with the fact that I do live in a slight bubble, you know, just the way it goes. I work online a lot, and I'm working with I work with an American lady who lives in London, and I work with Jon Draper, who lives in Vegas, and I work with Indian people in the UK.
Yeah.
So very strangely international.
Well, why not? I mean, yeah.
In the summer, they come for the whole summer too, like a lot of the people. So we've got a German family that come, and they have kids age and all that. And then a Norwegian family who come. The Norwegian family, the father is a lecturer or a high school teacher, and he read my book in like a day. Like he speaks English better than most English people, you know. Just like, and his daughter is like 10 and speaks absolutely fluent English. I mean, it just blows me away. Like they grow up with it as a second language, but almost like a first language, you know. But so summers are fun here. It's very international.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, no wonder we get along so well, having Jon Draper as a friend.
Yeah.
You have to have this certain type of personality. But I always found it weird. Never. I mean, now I can ask you why. But I always found it weird that you are the ghostwriter for Jon Draper's book. I always wondered why you're not friends on Facebook, and I always wondered why that was. I never understood why you were not befriended on Facebook. I always thought like why I found you not being friends with Jon Draper. I was like, did they
No,
have a fight after
I just have a
publishing the
different
book?
name on Facebook.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So
No,
the person with your name on Facebook I found was not you then.
right. No. I guess not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm fully connected with Jon Draper on everything. Actually, I'm an admin on his Jon Captain Crunch page. So some of the things that get posted on there is me posting them.
I see. I
yeah.
see. Okay. Well, then there are probably other people with the name Wilson Fraser.
It must be, yeah. I mean, yeah. Like we have a strange relationship because, like I say, when I met him, I had no idea who he was. It wasn't most of the people he meets already kind of know roughly. A lot of them know who he is. They know something, or he starts talking and then they under, oh yeah, they're at some conference or something like that. But once he went into kind of the rave community, he was meeting people who, although a lot of the rave community in San Francisco were also tech. There was a big tech crossover. But
Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea who he was. I just thought he was interesting. So, and we formed this really close friendship. I mean, we've sat on hundreds of evenings watching some silly science fiction thing and just chatting and chat. And we're like kind of brothers almost, like, and I don't know, sometimes I'm like the big brother, even although he's much older than me. But we just sit and talk about just general human things and experiences. And he started telling me all his time in the army and everything. And so the book was developed over years of just listening and picturing his life. And I could see the interest and ins and outs of his life,
Awesome.
But we
Awesome.
do have like most of the other people that he's kept in regular communication with through his life are because of something to do with tech.
Like me, for example, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I have helped him. I've, through being a designer, I've helped him in many things over the years. But that was a secondary thing. Like the tech thing was a secondary thing, and my friendship with him was more a human thing. Like I think in the early days when he was still really physical, we went on some quite fun adventures and like swimming in the rivers and going to New Mexico and Burning Man and all this kind of stuff. It was all very, very real worldy,
Awesome.
I just thought he was always just such a character to be with,
Definitely. I totally enjoyed the time I had with him. It's amazing, and I'm really happy that he is so much full of energy, really. And I really hope, I don't know if you spoke with Jon Artigo about it, but I really hope that the movie will also give some financial ease for Jon Draper, because that is something he mentioned a lot in my last call with him, that he needs more funding to get a better living condition and more assistance.
Yeah, I mean, he could always have done with more funding for everything. I mean, he's struggled since I met him. Like when I met him, he was living in a rented room. I'm not saying he's not had a good life. He's always had, and I put this in the book, he's had a good life. He's had a really varied, fun life, but he's always struggled for money. He's never, like why he didn't have someone looking after him in those early days after Apple, who went, look, this guy deserves to be looked after, and like put some kind of fund for him out of some shares in Apple or something like that. I mean, I'm thinking Wozniak but Wozniak, we've talked to Wozniak a bit, and he wrote the foreword for the book and stuff. He's always tried to help John, but you would think someone like that would have set up some kind of fund that would have helped him throughout his life. That he couldn't just blow the money on whatever. Because I think there was a short time where he had some money after Captain Software, Easy Writer, and all that, and I think he kind of blew it. Doesn't surprise me.
That is what many people in the tech community say, that that Steve Wozniak is not doing enough.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been. I mean, they're good friends. They're totally good friends, and he's got good things to say about John was. But yeah, it would have been nice if. Wozniak is not, let's just say, not neurotypical either. He's an interesting character as well,
Yeah.
So the idea that he has the wherewithal to think of someone else in that much maybe is asking too much. But yeah, you would think maybe he would have somehow set up something to help him over the years a little bit more. But
But somehow Jon Draper always pulls through. In one way or another,
I mean, even now, he's in a care home. He has everything he needs. It'd be nicer if he was more comfortable. It'd be nicer if it was more upscale. It'd be nicer if he was more, but he's still got what he needs, Whether or not the movie, by the time a movie is made, will it benefit him much at this time in life? I don't know, I don't know. I mean, that's what we were hoping with the book as well, and like I was saying, the movie deal just after the book, that fell through. That was, I'm sure you know who Kim.com is.
Oh, yes, of course.
Well, John and Kim.com did a little interview together, a little video chat thing. And, and Kim.com basically said, well, I am going to invest in the movie about you and all this guy in the interview, But of course, after the BuzzFeed thing happened, even Kim.com just kind of backed away a little bit,
And now with the new movie?
Well, actually, we should probably approach him again. Yeah.
Which is not so easy anymore because his assistant died of cancer.
Oh, okay. Well,
Finn Potato died last year.
Okay. We were working with a guy who was helping us with helping us with protecting John a little bit in the days of the book project, and he was our contact to contact to Kim.com. So we don't really have an easy in to speak to Kim.com. When you were meeting Jon Artigo last week was when I couldn't get connected.
Right,
Yeah.
That's why we are doing this appointment now, exactly.
Now, the internet here in Spain is okay. We have cable, we have fiber optic and all that, but it does occasionally, they seem to do an awful lot of maintenance or something.
Ooh.
It just goes down occasionally, and the power goes off occasionally. It's a bit like a third world country. It's like
Wow.
Just
Didn't know that about Spain, okay?
Well, again, because we live almost rural, it's like on the edge of a little village, and it's like old electricity pylons and all this shit.
Ooh.
Now, last week when you were on the call with Jon Artigo, our internet went down, and I was like, well, I've still got my phone, right? My phone plan is nothing to do with my internet. It's a totally different company. It doesn't use the same providers, nothing. It went down as well. So I was like, this is Draperism.
Draperism, yeah.
It's very strange, very strange.
Perfect. First try, first go. Yeah, you are trained. I see that.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I've got two things coming up. I've been interviewed for two different things that might be on, not on TV, but like be used in some kind of media things. And someone just said the same thing. Oh, you get really natural the way you come across on camera. And I thought, maybe I missed my calling in life. I've never thought of myself. I always felt I've always felt unnatural on camera, but maybe as I get older, I just don't care, and I'm just like.
That's funny because you don't look so old to me.
53.
Ooh, okay. Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
So basically, 30 years, 30 years shy of Jon Draper.
Yeah, I saw him. I saw him the first time I was visiting the States in 1993. The first time I ever saw him, he was standing trying to con his way into a party without paying, and I thought, who's this old guy? You know, because I was 23, he was like 55. You know.
Yeah.
And then when I went back the next year, I saw him at another party, and another party. So we were just destined. I was like, what a strange character this guy is. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he.
So 30, yeah, almost 30 years. 30 years since I first saw him, but 29 years since I've known him.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's also the thing he said constantly when he was here the 2 times in my city, and I saw him. He was like, "I'm not too old. I can still travel."
Yeah.
He always considers himself the young, fresh person.
Yeah. I mean, when he was a regular in the San Francisco rave scene, there was a few older people in the scene, but it was mostly people in their 20s. And here's this old guy with just a pair of shorts on, you know, shirt off, jumping around, hairy, you know. But he had no perception that he stood out. He was just, I'm just one of the crowd, you know.
Exactly. Amazing. Awesome. Nice to meet finally somebody who has the same experience and view about Jon than I have. Yeah. Minus, of course, the rave scene. I'm totally not a rave guy.
Actually,
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, let's keep in touch then.
Exactly. Add me on WhatsApp. Send me a message there. Right. Now you got my number, right?
Okay, I will.
Talk to you then.
Okay.
Good night. Bye-bye. Talk to you then. Bye-bye. Nice. Well, I have to center again, or else half of my face is cut off. That's always my issue.
Yeah, hopefully I'm okay. Like, I'm a little off center. Like, my microphone's actually right here. It's invisible. It's being covered by my video effects, but yeah. So I kind of wanted to be a little off center so that you don't see that the whole time.
Oh, it's not a problem. It's not a problem.